Call to order the Tuesday, November 15th, 2022 Town Council Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:33. Roll call. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Bordelon. Okay. Calendar and communications, Councilor Baumgartner.
Good evening, everyone. A lot has happened since our last meeting. Was elected to the 41st House District, representing the southern half of Groton and the southwestern corner of Stonington. So first and foremost, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the district for their overwhelming support, their trust, and most of all, thank every single person who made their effort to show up to the polls, irrespective of who they voted for. We live in truly unprecedented times, and we are so fortunate and lucky to live in a country, live in a community where your right to vote is protected, and certainly, we, I think, oftentimes take it for granted. So I very much look forward to this new responsibility, continuing the important work we have on the council at this moment as well. But with that, nothing else to report. Thank you.
Councilor Parker.
We received communications, and I attended the Sub-Vets Veterans Day event on Friday, on Veterans Day. Very nice event. I was glad I was able to be there and represent. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Franco.
Thank you. I attended the RTM meeting as well as receiving numerous communications and discussions with residents in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also received various communications and emails from residents and other people, and just congratulations to all the candidates on the election last Tuesday.
Councilor McBride.
Thank you. Last week, we held the Property Reuse Committee. Councilor Bordelon, Councilor Westervelt was present, as well as several other agencies, Planning and Zoning, Groton Housing Authority, and I forget one other one. So I wanted to thank them for their input on the document that we're working on now. We also have a meeting tomorrow night to refine that document further. Hopefully we'll have something to the council soon. Also attended the Groton Parks and Rec stakeholder meeting last week with Councilor Franco. And also, prior to this meeting, had the Personnel and Appointments Committee meeting with Councilor Baumgartner and Councilor Westervelt. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westervelt.
Thank you very much. Very much had the same communications that most councilors have had with emails and just generally talking to the public. Also with the personnel appointments committee meeting tonight and property reuse last week. Looking forward to moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kassiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received various communications regarding the Mystic Education Center, the car accidents on Fort Hill and Wendy's, an invitation to Girls on the Run end of season 5K, which will be held at Great Neck Elementary School on November 19th, so Saturday at 9:30 a.m. And for those of you that don't know what Girls on the Run is it is a great program hosted at some of our Groton elementary schools, which is inspiring girls to be joyful, healthy, and confident through a program that integrates running. We received an update on Laurelwood, land use restrictions, TVCCA, Branford Manor, and the Historic District Commission, and also received an email about Harp and Hound and ARPA. And I've also watched the RTM meetings and the RTM Public Safety Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I received lots of the similar correspondences that other councilors did. I also would just like to thank all the poll workers and the town clerk's office, all the candidates that ran for a great election day. Congratulations certainly to those winners. Look forward to working with all of them in the future. But with that, we'll go on to calendar and communications. Approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the November 7, 2022 meeting minutes. So moved.
Second, Jones.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Jones. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
McBride abstains.
Okay, carries 7 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstaining. McBride. Okay, just to note that Counselor Bordelon has joined us at 6:38. And on to new business. Conservation Commission, open space protection.
Good evening. As you may recall, this was before the council last week. As a reminder, the Conservation Commission gave a presentation, which is in the agenda pack tonight as a refresher. The Conservation Commission is seeking to add language to certain parcels to recognize them as being open space and protected. And I will mention, I do have, Larry Dunn is with us tonight. If there's any questions for the chair of the Conservation Committee. One of the questions that was asked of me, though, is a legal opinion on what would happen if you established such language and then later wanted to take it back, to remove it. It would require either Attorney General's office permission or else a cypre action through the courts. Let's see. As a reminder, the two pieces we're talking about is 0 Linton Avenue and 0 Industrial Drive. Let's see. Now, some of the items, we only had a week on this, but some of the items we found was Deb Jones found a map for 0 Lytton that had on there a development map not to be developed on that parcel. Believe it would be sufficient to protect the property. Now, the state open space map from the 2000s shows both properties as open space. I don't think that's likely a protective measure, though. It's just what it basically had been used at the time for. And then there's some zoning information in the packet for each of the properties. Quite a bit of information on it. And you see if you go to page 15 in the packet, under 0 Industrial Drive, the acreage is 22.45. The zoning is GR, Green Recreation. The allowable uses are recreation, playgrounds, community garden, food truck, accessory only. There's no access to a town-accepted road. Acquired in 1992 from General Dynamics. Let's see, there are some wetlands on there. And then for 0 Lytton, 8 acres, multifamily residence. That is the one, though, that has the not to be developed on the map. But allowable uses are open space, parks, 1 and 2 family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, hospitals, nursing homes, schools, places of worship, cemeteries, community counseling, and halfway houses. There's no access to town or city accepted road there. And that was acquired in 2001. And also that property has got a steep slope and a water course.
Point of information.
What's your point of information?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear because there was some noise in the room. Could you just repeat what the town attorney said?
Yeah, if that restrictive language is placed on properties and recorded, before the council could take act, if the council wanted to remove it, before they could do so, you would have to have either the Attorney General's office approve or else a cypre action through the courts, and it likely would be something similar to what we did with the Merritt property. We'd have to swap equal value and area.
Thank you.
So, Manager Burr, I have a question. With this, if we were to reverse this, in the future, try to reverse it and do a land swap, that's only if we're trying to build on these specific properties, right?
Or if you needed them as a trade value towards building somewhere else. You know, if that was open space already. So only in those 2 instances, though.
Okay, so,
'Cause just like the Merritt property was already protected, so we did that. But if one of those 2 we swapped for it was also protected, we wouldn't be able to swap them.
Right.
So,
but, okay, and I'm just trying to understand here. Presumably, if we were trying to build on another plot of land, and we were swapping for this plot of land, which is protected, aren't they interested in swapping for a plot of land that is protected?
They want new acquired land, not the existing. If it's already protected, it won't be usable for a match or for a swap.
Okay, interesting. So, in the future, if we wanted to build somewhere, then, and we wanted to swap this, we'd have to go, you said, to the Attorney General?
You'd still have to, yeah, you have to go through the release process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's, may I, point of clarification? If it's already protected, we wouldn't go through the swap. It wouldn't be
No, you'd have
eligible,
to have
it
a-
would not even
basically
be
go through
eligible.
two processes, that if you actually wanted to swap that, you'd have to swap something else for that. So
You
it
wouldn't
really
be-
would make sense, yeah.
So, to clarify, if there was a piece of property that was already protected, these two parcels will not be allowed to use as a swap,
Correct.
even if we took them out. There's no way to get them out of protection to put them back into protection.
Probably, it probably wouldn't be acceptable, yeah.
Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. There was something written on the 0 Lytton Avenue property that said unbuildable.
Right.
That's just a comment from a developer. That's not an official ruling by a town or
It's
conservation.
a comment on the development plan, and it's, talking with Deb Jones, it's likely something the city would honor on that development plan. And
But-
it isn't, I tried to include that in that, but it's so tiny, it didn't really show up.
But is
It's
that
other-
something that was put by the town, or was it put by
When it
just
was
the developer?
recorded and permitted and reported, so it went through a permitting process likely at the time,
Mhm.
whatever that process was then. So chances are, we haven't had a legal opinion, chances are it would remain valid for protecting that piece.
Okay, but it could just been a comment from the guy who owned it. Is that right?
Well, if you went through, if this got actually approved, then it would be an enforced comment. Depends on if that was put in and gone through, like if somebody designates something like that, going through our approval process, part of the approval is whatever's on that plan. So if it was on the plan when it was approved, it would likely be valid.
So
A lot
even.
more research, I can't say for sure.
So I'm saying, even though he might have just written a comment on there and the plan got approved, they may not really be valid, or this is 50 years later.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know
So
what the process was then.
we don't know what was going on, and things have changed a lot since then. So, okay, all right,
It would take a bit of research to figure that out.
okay.
Counselor Kassirian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any current interests in these properties, Mr. Burt?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And you stated that 0 Lytton Avenue, which is zoned as an RM multifamily residence, that a lawful use of that would be a 1 and 2 family dwelling or multifamily dwellings, correct?
Correct.
And do we have a housing shortage here in Groton?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And 0 Industrial Drive, you stated it was a GR zoned area, which is green or recreation, which means it has an allowed use or a lawful use of recreation, playgrounds, community garden, and food truck. Do we have a referral right now trying to place playgrounds on town properties?
No. Well, yeah, looking broadly, not in this property though, right? Yeah, we are looking broadly at what's available. This one isn't under consideration yet, but
Great, thank you.
Counselor Bordelon?
Thank you. I just know on the one that's zoned in the city side, I know there's been many talks, and I've said it before, that the folks on that side have stated there's a shortage of open space and protected land on that side. So I do think it's really important to consider that on the side where we have, EB, Pfizer, and even though the subbase is in the town, technically, it butts right up to the city side. So there's a lot going on there, Pfizer. So any opportunity to protect space on that side, folks have been asking, or it has been stated. So I just wanted to ask a question. What's the city's stance on the open space? And I know Mr. Donnan as well. Can they speak to the need of open space needed on the city side at all?
Mr. Dunn, if the mayor wants to bring Mr. Dunn up to talk,
Sure.
there's
Or
not a city,
whoever else.
I don't have anybody from the city though.
Sure, if you'd like to speak to it.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things in general on the, I would call it on the city side, is an analysis we've done as part of the conservation plan for social equality, justice, in terms of where things are. So we're in the middle of that evaluation in terms of access, in terms of bus routes, access to open space. And the conclusion so far is, yes, there's a, let's call it, not equal access and availability on that side of the town. So that we want to work into the current evaluation report that's being done by Parks and Rec. And we're giving our information to that, and hopefully that will come back to you in that report, and I think it's probably second quarter.
All right, and then my other question is, I know at the last meeting it was stated for the town manager that town staff were not opposed, they didn't see a problem with adding the language, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so, yeah, I think if the town staff are in support, they're not opposed to it. We have folks here today that are wanting to put on adding language, which, we are trying to look at the town in a more resilient, sustainable way. This is an opportunity to fix the language on these 2 parcels of land to help our town, and there are ways that we can go back later if we need them. It's always better to protect first and then go back and change later if you need it, but once you lose it, you kind of, it's kind of gone, so, thank you.
Counselor Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Mr. Dunn. Did you say you were working with who? Parks and Rec with the town or Parks and Rec with the city?
Well,
Or their planning and zoning?
it's, I believe the consultant was Barry Dunn, who's working with Parks and Rec of the town.
But I believe Council Bordelon was asking if the city was in favor of this, or you've talked to the city. And if I misspoke, forgive me, but I thought she asked about Groton City.
The question, I believe, was the access and availability on that side of the town to open space.
May I clarify, Mayor?
Sure, briefly.
So what I had stated was, there was no city, anybody here, so there's nobody to answer the question from the city. So I asked Mr. Don, because I remember the presentation with the green belts and the greenway presentation that he did a couple years ago, looking at equal access on the city side. And so that's what I was asking, to express that there was a need. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Parker.
Okay, so my question would be, has Mr. Dunn contacted Groton City before? I know there's the plan, you talked about the Beltway, but is the city on board? So we can't clarify what the city might want if that's what their goal is, even though it's town property.
Well, we have.
I just want all of us be on board.
Yeah, we have worked with the city. We've included them in the Conservation Development Plan. And, together on the Birch Creek Plant area, which is kind of bridges between the city and, we're working together to look at that specific area. But on these properties, since it's town-owned property, we did not specifically go back and ask. We did go back through Town Manager Burt's committee, which I think is run by Councilor McBride on the town-owned property valuation, and these 2 properties were taken to that committee for review.
It wasn't that committee, it's the internal staff committee that reviews these.
Internal
Yeah.
staff? Okay, sorry.
It's people from most every department that review it.
Okay, I misspoke. Apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Franco?
Thank you. So we've had the properties for about 21 years and 30 years, and we haven't done anything with them. And they've been open space for our community, just not in protections, with a legal protection. And there could have been the potential that when we were doing a swap with them for the Merritt property, that I'm sure, because conservation groups were brought in to ask what their opinions were of which properties in the community they wanted to protect. And they chose to, it was Boulder Heights, and then they chose the King property. And if we don't have these open spaces to do a swap in the future, potentially 20, 30 years down the line, we will have to purchase property to do a swap. And I just don't see a real need to put this in protection right now. We received an email from Mr. Frank, who is on the Groton Housing Authority, and he had stated that this land was not high valuable conservation land. It doesn't have a waterfall, it's not, vernal pools, it doesn't have, special fauna and all these other things that he notated. And while we are speaking to the Conservation Committee, he did make note that we haven't spoken to Groton Housing Authority, and we haven't spoken to Economic Development, and there's other committees and other people within our community that may want to have input on this, and we haven't offered them a seat at the table to put their input either. And he has requested that maybe we put this on, up to a public hearing and ask some members of our, other committees to chime in on this as well. But I don't think at this time that there's a real, actual need to put this in protection when it's been sitting there for, 20, 30, both of them 20 to 30 years, and nothing's happened with them. Community members are obviously able to walk on them. And so I would suggest either we bring it to a public hearing and invite others to come to our council and speak, or we just, me personally, I'm not voting in favor of this because I think protecting our, having this land in the future for our town to use is more important for these properties, if needed. Thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Mr. Burke, should we place conserve these two properties in perpetuity? Are there other properties in town that the town still holds that would not have, those types of restrictions on them currently?
We only got through this last time in Merritt because we had the part of Catherine Kolnaski that had some value to it. I think the only way would be if you had school property that could have a section carved out that had some open space value, because that was acceptable to the AG's office.
So akin to what transpired with Catherine Kolnaski School.
Correct.
So all the property to the left of it, which is now Saskis Nature Preserve. Highly recommend it to any person who would like to enjoy a quick 2-hour Saturday hike.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, could you speak more into the microphone?
Of course. So the exact language that we would be placing on the land records for these two properties would be primarily for open space preservation and conservation of wooded site. Is there any language, either question for Mr. Byrd or Mr. Dunn, any language on our current Groton land records that utilize that specific language? Or is this kind of a new definition, if you will?
No, the language came from a prior town council decision on similar land. And it's really as Councilor Franco mentioned, it's more like 70 years on one of the properties, so, that's been in this state, and we were just trying to codify the pragmatic fact that it's open space, so that when we do the inventory, which is part of the Conservation Commission's responsibility, we properly reflect what is and isn't. So it's just a question of, it wouldn't be in the protected open space category, it would be in a different category. Right? I mean, so that's the only effective impact practically that I would see, given the fact that on Industrial Road, FEMA projections kind of look like 75% of the property will probably be salt land or salt marsh in that time. So don't expect anybody's going to build on that, that's for sure.
And this is zero industrial?
That's on industrial, right, over by the railroad tracks.
And it's just behind the water treatment plant as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you look at even the land records that we received, looks like there's a right-of-way just north of that property, and it's the old trolley trail, which is now used for passive recreation, biking, cycling. And so, there's no driveway or any road leading to it, so it really is not developable. So I'm comfortable supporting the motion this evening. We discussed this topic ad nauseum at our last council meeting. We took no action, but now we have the opportunity to do so. And again, this is not, while this is, represents 22.45 acres and 8 acres of land, so a total of about 30. In the whole scheme of things, we can still have a lot more work to do, but land conservation and protecting open space is a marathon, it's not a sprint, as evident by kind of the, we're talking in 20, 30-year timeframes as opposed to in the now. So this is important. I'll be supporting this and implore my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Councilor McBride?
Thank you. This one I find a little difficult, and I completely in supportive of open space protection. However, I'm struggling because here we are trying to define this property reuse committee where we're going to review town properties and how to move forward and what to do with them. And here we are approving this, which I look at as kind of a one-off and not going to follow the process that we're trying to establish. So although I'm a proponent of open space, I feel like it's kind of a one-off, and I'm wondering if we can wait until we develop this process and the council vets the process and makes changes, and then any properties that come up, we use the process that the council approves to look at various properties. If we waited 70 years, I kind of agree with Councilor Franco that maybe we can wait, 6 more months until we have a vetted document that we can use for any and all town-owned property. So I'm going to abstain, not that I'm opposed to it, but I think we could use some time to try to develop a process for all the town-owned lands. Thank you.
Councilor Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dunn, just to rehash what we spoke about last week, the commission identified properties that were over 3 acres, correct? Because that was part of the requirements to do this protection?
Well, it's not a requirement. It was just from an efficiency. There's a lot of, many little tiny parcels here and there.
Right.
That don't really have a lot of value in any way. So we just made it, quite frankly, arbitrarily, we put that level to do the analysis because Tom's been in the basements looking through land records to say, what's the history here, what's on record, what's not on record. And it came out as part of a cleanup exercise. That's all, because it has been considered protected open space, and we found out, gee, it wasn't. So
Right.
we're just trying to fix the record.
Understood. And, right, there's many identified parcels that are kind of all over the place here, but these were the 3 significant parcels that you found that were over 3 acres. Mr. Olson is nodding his head behind you.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. So these would be 3 significant properties that if we ever did have to do a swap again to make sure that we do have some land, these kind of are significant because they are the 3 that you identified that are significant enough for you to want them protected, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And just to go back to my question from earlier, Mr. Burt, we identified that 0 Lytton Avenue had a lawful use for 1 and 2 family dwellings or multifamily dwellings. And just to clarify again, do we have a shortage of income-limited housing and affordable housing?
We do.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Just to reiterate, the motion on the table is which is written in your packets. It's already on the floor, but it was from a previous meeting. So I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, abstentions?
McBride abstains.
So I have 3 in favor, Baumgartner, Bordelon, Melendez, 5 opposed, 1 abstaining, McBride. So it fails.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
request a roll call. What were the 5 opposed?
5 opposed are Kasiri, Parker, Jones, Franco, and Westervelt.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to Thames Valley Council for Community Action Update. Welcome.
Thank you so very much. It's nice to be here in person this year. I was reflecting back on when we gave a presentation, it was about 13 months ago. So hopefully we can give you some information tonight to update. So first, let me introduce myself. Deborah Monahan. I am the CEO of TVCCA. I have with me
Paul Jorgensen with Silver Petroselli Architects Engineers in Hampton.
And Megan Brown, the Chief Operations Officer of TVCCA.
So quickly, for people who may not know anything about TVCCA, we're a very large human service agency that serves primarily New London County, although we do operate programs throughout the east region of the state. We provide a wide range of services, which include housing, employment and training, WIC, Head Start, and early childhood development, senior nutrition, Meals on Wheels, RSVP, energy assistance, and case management that helps people with basic needs, to name a few. The main kind of goal of TVCCA, from my perspective as the CEO, is to leverage resources to help people in our community with whatever their need is. If it's a housing need, if it's a childcare need, if it's Meals on Wheels, a senior nutrition need, we take it very seriously and do whatever we can to leverage resources. Last year, we leveraged somewhere to the tune of $44 million. Now, a lot of that was, of course, ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan Act, some CARES dollars were in there as well. And our program, energy assistance program, is growing exponentially as the price of oil goes up. So just a little plug for energy. Please refer people who are struggling with their utility bills to TVCCA. But the reason we're here tonight is to give you an update on the early childhood program in Groton and where we're at and the work that we've been doing over the last 13 months. So to refresh your memory, we operate in the facility currently. There are 3 modular buildings. Head Start, which serves 3 to 5-year-olds. Early Head Start, which is actually a home visiting program where the 0 to 3-year-olds come into the center either once a month or something like that for socialization activities. Our Little Learners program, which is funded by the state. Head Start is federally funded. Little Learners is funded by the state, serves children from 6 weeks to age 5. And we serve approximately 85 children in that center. So as I said, we've been very busy. We've been working with a variety of funders and funding sources. So our last presentation to you was October of 2021. In December of 2021, we issued an RFQ for an architectural firm for the project. Silver Petroselli was the winner of that RFQ, and in February of 2022, we awarded an initial $80,000 contract to Silver Petroselli to begin the drafting of the renderings. In April of this year, April 2022, we applied for what was known as the community project funding through our congressional delegations. So we submitted 3 proposals, one to Congressman Courtney, one to Senator Blumenthal and one to Senator Murphy, requesting $1 million each to help us fund the child care center. And the good news is that we did receive the go-ahead and the green light for $3 million towards the construction of the child care facility. It is now currently working its way through Congress, but we've passed a few of the committee hurdles, so it's right now in the appropriations bill. Fingers crossed, as soon as the Congress approves the federal fiscal year 23 budget that began in October, because right now we're on continuing resolution, that money should be forthcoming. We also have been working with private funders. We work with a lot of foundations to leverage resources. Sometimes they fund some of the things that the state or the federal government won't, and we have some commitments from them as our project proceeds. We have had ongoing conversations, going back to the Head Start program, with our federal funders at HHS, Health and Human Services, the Administration for Children and Families. They fund our Head Start program. They currently have funded $249,000 towards the pre-development costs of the project. We also are having ongoing conversations with the Office of Early Childhood. They are the state funder of our child care programs. There are dollars that will be available. They haven't come out yet towards renovations, construction of projects, so we hope to leverage some resources there. Some of it is really piecing things together, but we're having some very good conversations, and there's a lot of support for this project. In October of this year, we went out for a commissioning agent. Those responses were received last week, and we haven't had a chance to review them quite yet, but we hope to, at some point, have a commissioning agent on board as well. In terms of TVCCA and the town and what we've been doing, for over 50 years, TVCCA has had a partnership with the town of Groton. In the current location where we are, we haven't been in those buildings for 50 years. Those buildings were replaced in 1990. But prior to that, there were facilities there where TVCCA offered Head Start services to the Groton community. And I've been with the agency for a long time, and they were there when I started. So the relationship that the town of Groton has had with TVCCA has been well over 50 years. I wanted to just give kind of a shout out to the town people that we have been working with through this project. Town manager John Burt has been very supportive, very helpful, very guiding in terms of how we go through this process. The Public Works with Greg Hansen, very, very supportive, helpful as we go through some of the testing and things like that we have to do to the facility. And then on the community and economic development side, John Reiner and Paige Bronk have been extremely helpful. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone. We are currently, I think this is why we're kind of here tonight, to set the stage for whatever action the council needs to take. We're looking for a 50-year lease, a long-term commitment to continue to work with the town. If we're going to leverage funding, the current lease that we have expires in 2026, I believe, 2025 or 2026, and that will not be long enough, of course, to leverage these types of resources. Funders are going to want to see a long-term commitment between the town and TVCCA. So our hope is that you will take whatever process action needs to happen from your perspective to have that 50-year lease be executed. We're also having preliminary conversations, have had preliminary conversations with the town, and I think you're going to hear about that after our presentation with respect to some of the community investment funding with hopes of leveraging some of those dollars for this project. The only downside that has happened in the last year is, I believe when I gave the presentation to you 13 months ago, we talked about an $8 million facility. My memory serves me right. The current price tag is hovering around $16 million. Inflation and supply chain challenges and materials going up have just increased the cost. But I'm very optimistic that in some way, shape, or form, we will raise the resources necessary to construct this facility. I had a packet, John, I don't know, did you give that to them?
Yes.
I included pictures, but mine a little. And the architect has big pictures for you to kind of see some of the renderings that we've come up with for that site. So again, thank you very much for your time tonight. Here to answer any questions. Paul can answer any questions relative to the facility. I've got backup with Megan if there's any questions relative to that. But again, thank you so very much.
Thank you for your presentation. I toured your facilities probably about 11 months ago, and you guys were very optimistic about building the new building. Unfortunately, it seems you need more funding now, right? So that is unfortunate, but I'm optimistic that you will be able to get those fundings with this longer lease. I'm just going to put a motion on the floor first. Motion to recommend a resolution to set a public hearing date for January 3rd, 2023 for the establishment of a new lease combining current leases for 36, 38, and 40.5 Central Ave, and to refer the matter to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Baumgartner. Counselor Bordelon?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the update, and, you know, it's, I'm very familiar with your program. My son, who's 19 now and in the Navy, at one point, there was a shortage at one time, many years ago, and he got in over income and, you know, got a slot because we couldn't, back when there wasn't any openings in public preschool, as a military family that was moving back from up in Maine. So I had a chance to use your facilities, and you know, I think the concept is a very nurturing environment where the children sit around and pass like a family-style like dinner. And I remember a lot of those key aspects, and a lot of great things were learned there. And I still have a lot of great pictures that you guys had given me, laminated and things. So very familiar with your program and excited. And one of the big things that came out of COVID and very important to look at is the need for accessible and affordable childcare for all. And with that comes quality facilities. You know, like I said, my son was there probably over 12, 13 years ago, and I'm sure it's aged since then. And so it's important that we, you know, keep up with the times and provide. And the need now even more so, we're seeing, you know, for moms to return to work, they're having trouble finding, you know, childcare. Inflation costs are up, so this is just a no-brainer to me. And, you know, I really appreciate when you guys did come out and speak with us. This update is, you know, very welcomed, and it's a great asset to our community and in closing our achievement gaps. And when you look at, you know, graduation rates and things, you know, TVCCA has a strong hand in ensuring that kids are prepared to enter kindergarten. And as that rigor increases, even, you know, recently I was looking at a friend's, you know, daughter in kindergarten and looking like, wow, they're expecting them to do this. And it's great that they're advancing, but without these affordable preschools, some folks don't get access. So I just want to thank you. My first question, though, is with the architecture, it looks like a really neat, beautiful design, and it looks like it would fit into the neighborhood. Any environmental protections, any solar or anything like that at all?
Thank you. When you say environmental protections, we have taken into account some environmental initiatives, if you will. Solar can be added to this, and it was something that we were looking at in the early stages of the building. But in terms of the systems of the building, we're looking at a geothermal ground source heat system for the property, which the property is large enough to support a facility like this with geothermal, so that is the current design for the heating and cooling of the building. Another initiative that we have is in the construction itself. We're proposing an insulated concrete formwork for the exterior walls of the building, which is benefits the insulation of the building. So we're going to be creating a very tight, highly insulated building that will cut utility costs, in operating costs on a regular basis.
Well, that's exciting to hear, that to hear that you guys have went that far. And even, has there been any look at solar lighting in the parking lots as well?
Yes.
Awesome.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's great. And my last question, I know there's always the gated, playground, because, the little ones, you don't want them to run away. You got one teacher and 5 kids, and any open playground that maybe the community could use in that neighborhood? I know it's a community, the kids have to go across the street, but it might be something where there might be an area that could be utilized for the neighborhood at all. Any thoughts on that?
Currently, we have facilities where, again, it's a catch-22. So we can consider that going forward. I don't think we've necessarily considered it yet. And again, we got the price for playgrounds. Playgrounds are going to cost $500,000. So we want to protect them, but, we have community rooms. We do have, I think, a community room plan in here, so we want it to be community-friendly. And you'll note in the lease, it said that we would lease the land and then one building, because we are hoping to preserve one of the buildings, not the two to the left, but the one kind of to the side. One of those the side building.
That's right. So we have 2 existing buildings right in the center of the site here, and a third one on the far south corner, or southwest. So the new building is closer to the corner, and we'll be removing the 2 existing very small buildings here in the center and maintaining that third.
And it's the hope with that third building, excuse me, that we could offer more community services. So in other words, WIC, energy assistance, instead of having to come to a New London office, we can outstation staff there and make it much more accessible for folks. And, I don't know when gas is going to go down, so I'm planning for it not to. We're going to try to bring this stuff to Groton.
I only have 15 seconds left, but I just want to thank you guys, and that's exciting because having that accessibility where folks don't have to go across the bridge and can apply for, services on this side would be amazing. So I love the thought process, and I'm really excited. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor Jones.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Congratulations, I think it's great progress that you've made, and I think I was one of the visitors, it was about 11 months ago, so it was great to see. You were excited about it then, talking about it, and it's nice to see that you're already to this stage. I had 2 questions. One was, and maybe this is a question for Town Manager Burt, was about sort of rejiggling the land, so you had plenty of room. I know we had that question in the discussions. Is the property that they currently have sufficient for doing what they're doing?
Yeah, no problem with that.
Okay. And then the second question that we talked about on that visit was, again, maybe Town Manager Burt, where to put all of the students and kids while you're doing construction. Has that been solved yet? I know that we were excited about trying to figure out a solution for that.
I'm going to let the architect
Okay.
answer that.
Sure. The phasing is a big potential obstacle. In this case, because we can fit the new building adjacent to the existing, the goal is to maintain the services during construction. So we're going to be a building adjacent to, we have, fortunately, we have access from Midway Oval as well onto the site, so we can be behind the addition, or the new building, and away from their current operations while it's under construction.
If my memory serves me right, the only thing that would be lost would be a playground, but because it's a playground adjacent to it, the staff all work together anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
So no real disruptions then, and
No.
having these kids have to go to different places.
No,
So it looks
no.
like a great solution that you come up with, so.
We,
Cool, all right.
when we expanded our New London Center, we had we had a center that operated in the front and expanded in the back.
In the back,
And we didn't close services, so we try to be very sensitive to that, absolutely.
Great. Well, good luck in raising all the money.
Well, we got somebody who's going to Hartford soon. Right?
That's right. Counselor Franco.
Thank you. I also took a tour approximately 11 months ago with other counselors, and I saw firsthand the struggles that you're having, and how you do what you're doing there is just amazing and beyond me, how you can do it with all the children there and the tight, cramped quarters that you're working in. Very excited for this development in our community, and I've also heard from the community how important childcare is and the needs of our community and the struggles that parents are having with childcare. I would like to know about the contract and the changes to the contract, because now TVCCA would actually be building the buildings and owning the structures, I would assume, on basically what it would be considered leased property. And would that be coming to us prior to a public hearing so that the public could see the contract, or does that happen later?
It's very close to being done. There's some last-minute changes that we're working. The
Our attorneys
for the
are
site
going
working
back and
out,
forth.
but it's just about done.
Okay.
And we're
so-
combining right now there's 3 leases, we're combining them down into one.
All right, so if we have a public hearing on January 3rd, is there potential to get this onto our calendar in December?
To do the public, or the lease, to put it on the 13th,
Well,
December
it says
13th.
here, resolution to set a public hearing date for January 3rd is the motion on the floor. And I wanted to know if we were going to be able to see the contract before the public hearing.
I anticipate another week or so, we should have something.
So we should see it
Yeah.
come our December meetings?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I've been cheering for you from afar for all of this time, and since we've had our meeting, and understanding your true needs of this, and how it would benefit our community in such wonderful ways. And I thank you for all of what you do, and what you do for our community. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner?
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, each and every one of you, for coming out tonight and sharing these really amazing plans. Vividly remember our last meeting just over a year ago, and it's just so great to see how much headway you've made. Obviously, now we have designs, and just a few questions. First, you serve such a high needs population in Groton, and my first question would be, once we break ground and open this new facility, how do you plan on expanding programming so that more kids in Groton and our community can take advantage of all these great programs you already offer?
So one of the things that's been happening is, as everybody has said in their own special way, childcare is really an economic development issue. If you don't have adequate childcare, economic development is somewhat challenged because of the need of workers to have that affordable, accessible, reliable childcare. And so one of the things that has happened over the years is everybody recognized that, including the Connecticut legislature, and they have allocated additional resources for slots. And my kind of plea is always, you have the slots. My microphone went off. Nope.
Something was back on.
Okay. Anyways, you have the slots, but you don't have the facilities. You want us to, we can't expand in Groton right now. We are locked at 85. This facility hopefully will accommodate anywhere from, I think we've estimated, depending on, we're going from 2 IT rooms, 2 infant toddler rooms, to 6. Okay, so I don't know what percentage that is in terms of expansion, but from 2 to 6. We are expanding the preschool classrooms as well, and that way we can leverage additional resources. The legislature just allocated additional resources for infant toddler slots. We would love to apply for those and absorb them in our centers. We can't, we have no more space. So what has to happen is the funding for facilities has to catch up with all the funding for the slots, because that's what we're running up against. So I don't see it as an issue. Plus, what we do is we do needs assessments. Every 3 years, we're required to do a need assessment, and we can move programming and slots around depending on where the greatest need is. In addition to that, I talked about the Early Head Start program. That currently is a home visiting program. We would love to have an Early Head Start program in center. and this facility will help us realize that.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that there is already earmarked in the congressional, going through the congressional appropriations process, $1 million supported by each
Yeah,
of our
so it's 3 total.
members of our congressional delegation. So both Senators Blumenthal and Murphy and Congressman Courtney.
Yeah.
And so certainly, they've been strong partners to us in our community in many capacities, but certainly when it comes to education and early childhood education.
Congressman Courtney's staff was actually the ones, I think what they did was they probably met, consolidated it, and put it into the $3 million that came through Congressman Courtney, and I am in constant contact with them, and they are committed to helping us leverage what other additional resources we need to as well, so.
Outstanding, but certainly it's going to cost a little bit more than that. So you mentioned leveraging the community investment funds, potentially leveraging those pot of funds, and we'll be discussing that later today, this evening. But in your eye, I mean, do you have just an estimate, or how much would be required as far as those pot of funds to be able to break ground?
Well, my understanding of the community investment funds, and the staff here are certainly far more experts at it than I am, but we had originally, it was kind of funny, because when Paige and I connected, TVCCA had already been starting to look into that. I think working together, Groton Municipality and TVCCA, applying for this will be a powerful application, for sure. My recommendation would be we apply for somewhere between 10 to 15 million. Ask for it. We know what the cost of this is going to be. The $3 million we can use to help equip this. It's going to be a lot of money to open this center up. Many of you may not know, I have been with TVCCA for 49 years, and I'm headed towards retirement. And I hope to retire next year after 50 years of service and after I leverage $16+ million for this center. That's my commitment to you all. We really just want so much to have a state-of-the-art early childhood center in Groton. We have one in Norwich, we have one in New London, and now we need one in Groton. And that's my commitment to you and the community.
Outstanding. Well, our kiddos are better for it. Thank you for everything, not just for early childhood, but everything TVCCA does. And no further questions. Look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am a mom to 2 little ones. I now work with children every day in one of the schools here in Groton, so I cannot emphasize enough how important resources are, adequate resources are, to being able to work with children. I have the privilege of visiting the facility on Central Avenue with many of the other counselors, and I can't express enough how little storage space you have, how you don't even have rooms to have meetings with families in it. I mean, this is so necessary for our community to have the adequate resources that we need. So my question is, do you feel like this new building is going to be able to grow with TVCCA, is going to have the adequate storage spaces, is going to have, the community necessities for being able to have case management meetings and to meet with families? Do we feel like this is going to fit Groton?
This would be our largest facility because, to your point, we've constructed other facilities, 13,000, 15,000 square feet. We move in, we think we have adequate space, and in about 6 months, we're like, okay, that cafeteria is now a classroom, and that conference room is now an IT room. I can speak to that. So this one has been built with that in mind, with that adequate space. I think it's at 22,000 square feet, so it's got a nice footprint to have some of those kinds of things in there for sure.
Great, and thank you so much for all that you're doing for Groton and for our little ones, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I heard you speak to the pre-Head Start program, which I'm really familiar with as well, and I've seen folks utilize it, especially military families, and things like, at-home Play-Doh, and sometimes it can be cumbersome when other children in the house and the moms are distracted, so having that ability to be on site if needed could be huge to give the kids the accessibility and the learning time outside of the home, away from the TV and the distractions. So hearing that that program could expand is really exciting. My other question, though, is my other thought is that having that ability to have a mother or family that's maybe in a bit of a crisis, right? And now you can walk them over to that back building and say, let's sign you up today, and leave that day with a box of food or a jacket or whatever the need may be. And so,
SNAP benefits, energy assistance.
Right.
WIC.
so
right.
that linkability in itself, is that another sell to the state that we are able to utilize and maybe get extra funding? Because now we're growing our human resources, is adequate, but it's small in nature in comparison to like New London and even Westerly in some components. They do great work there, but even I sometimes find that our building is getting to be a little bit small. And so having some resource like this, is there any additional funding that we can get because we're now adding like a whole nother service?
We will leverage whatever we can, absolutely. And our staff, one of the good things that the pandemic did was we're much more mobile now than we ever were before. All of our intakes are done over the computer anyways, so we can relocate staff down here 1, 2, 3 days, whatever the community needs to help make that. And we work very closely now with the Groton Human Services Department. They've been great partners to us over the years, so we'll continue to do that, but I think it's going to expand what's currently available to the community.
Great. And then I guess my one more question for the architect, the landscaping side of things, are we planning to have, are we cutting down any additional trees? Are we going to add some, more trees to have some shaded areas for outside? What do you think the tapestry outside would look like?
That's a great question. The site plan is not 100% complete yet, so we are still looking at, especially around the playgrounds. We would like to add some very targeted shade areas around the playgrounds, which are located around the 4 areas or 4 corners of the building. And in addition to that, we will have a buffer along from the neighbors directly behind the building, so there will be some plantings there as well. But for the most part, we are going to maintain the existing trees that are on site wherever we can, wherever they're not directly in the footprint of the building and parking.
Nice. I think it looks really great, and I'm excited to see where this goes and hopeful for possibly the solar panels. My last question, is there any linking with the town where, obviously, because you guys are at a lower level, so if it was flooding, everyone would be evacuated, but if there was a loss of power with the thermal there, could this be a temporary shelter if needed in conjunction with the town, for people to be able to access?
I'm sure we could work that out. Absolutely, because that whole community there,
Right.
to your point, maybe potentially we could really open our doors to them. As long as the children weren't there, we can
Right.
open, in a crisis.
I'm just looking at the asset to the building and that
Yeah.
community that could be needed.
Yeah.
Let there be a major disaster that's not flooding in that area, because it
Yeah.
is low lying. But, having the thermo and the possibility of the solar panels could, end up being a temporary place where people could come warm some food.
Sure.
Should we have a major shutdown.
And that's another point. Thank you for mentioning food. Right now, there's no real kitchens there. They're these tiny, well, you saw the place,
Yes,
okay?
I remember it.
Like an apartment kitchen.
Yeah.
This facility will have a kitchen for the facility, so we can provide the kids that kind of highly nutritious hot meal that we do in our other childcare centers.
Nice. That's very exciting, and thank you for all the explanation, and I look forward to helping any way that I can.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yes. 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 7:47. Good? Okay, so we're back from recess at 7:52. And on to Connecticut Community Investment Fund Round 2. We have Director Reiner and Mr. Bronk.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So I know we just spoke about the Community Investment Fund at last week's council meeting, giving you some background about the program, the eligibility, the fact that round 2 for this grant is due applications January 6th. The state is looking to process those applications within about 5 or 6 months, and they'll be issuing out a total of 9 rounds. Just want to give a little kind of background overview. This is a substantial funding opportunity for the town of Groton. And last week, we kind of brainstormed with all the council members some of the types of applications that we're looking at and how we could proceed. Again, we don't want to rush through this process, but if there are some applications that we can put forward sooner than later, we wanted to talk to you more about moving forward with those. And the 3 projects, again, just as a reminder, the minimum funding for one of these projects is $250,000, and we are one of 54 municipalities that is eligible. Other nonprofits and some other organizations are eligible to apply, but we're one of only 54 of the 169 municipalities actually eligible to apply for this. So we do have a very good shot at getting some level of funding. For this round 2 proposal, we are putting forth 3 ideas that we wanted to bounce off the council tonight and start moving forward with processing those applications, because we do have a tight turnaround. And we can kind of go through some of the ideas for each one of them and then get some feedback from the council. So last time we had spoken about the former Groton Heights School project with some remediation, and also we reached out to the Bill Memorial Library, thinking about their ARPA project, and we have a conversation with them next week? Tomorrow, okay, to go over some of their needs and how we can partner up with them on this application. For that project, we're thinking somewhere in the vicinity of, depending on all the needs, $1.5 to $2.5 million. That would be environmental remediation and cleanup of the site, and then talking with the folks at Bill Memorial Library about some of their needs. We heard last time from some council members about, and we've been talking about some of the needs around town. We just heard a great presentation from TVCCA, and I think it was the day after the council meeting, we had a good discussion, or set up a meeting, and it was yesterday. This week just seems to be blending since last council meeting. Had a good conversation with the director of the organization, and we think we have a really good chance with a strong partnership working with them to put an application together somewhere $10–15 million. We do also have a call tomorrow with the lead staff person from DECD on the Community Investment Fund application. So we're going to pick that person's brain a little bit about application size and who is better to take the lead on the application between the town, TVCCA, or are we doing it in a joint application. Either way, we see working with them on some type of partnership moving forward for a substantial application, looking at their need and their large funding gap right now. And then the third application that I know we spoke about a little bit last time, I think there was some head scratching of how do we do this, how do we move forward, is Pleasant Valley School. And I do want to talk about that one in a little bit more detail, because that piece of property has gone through the entirety of the public process for disposition. We had gone out to RFP, and I think if we were to move forward with this type of process with Community Investment Fund, again, the state's not looking to really announce these awards for 5 to 6 months. Hope by that time the council will have looked at our process for how we dispose of properties, and if we moved forward, we'd then be looking to the council for direction on how do you then want to move forward with selling that property. We would be looking to apply for a grant somewhere in the $2 to $5 million range. The grant would be used for the demolition of the building, remediation, cleanup, cost towards kind of stepping back for a second. Some of the comments we heard through the public process of taking that previous multifamily development forward was the need for accessibility for the neighborhood to some type of small playground or park area, as well as we definitely heard a lot about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing. So the grant that we'd be looking for would be demo, remediation, cleanup, some type of playground or play area, green space, and at least a minimum of 20% of the units of anything that was constructed on there as deed-restricted affordable housing. How all that is done, if we got the grant funding, we would then need to work with the council and work that into any type of RFP process that the council wanted to lead in moving that forward. But that could get us a substantial funding source that would make all that possible. And that's about it I had on those. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Paige?
Just quickly, I think I had mentioned before, this is a highly competitive grant. There's a lot of money. However, I think I had this as a recap the last time. First round, there were 147 proposals that totaled $900 million, and the state allocated $76 million. So maybe roughly a 10% success rate. So even though we have great projects, they have to be competitive. That we have to definitely make sure that they're better than your average projects. Also, it is basically, in some ways, a political review at the state level. There are multiple tiers, committee. We have to have state legislators actually endorse our projects. And ultimately, the governor makes a selection, and then it goes to basically the bond committee or council. So it's going to have multiple eyes on it. We have to make sure that it's going to be attractive enough for people throughout the state and that we're leveraging dollars. So any additional monies we can bring to the table, which we're doing with some of these, I think that's going to help our chances.
Thank you.
And then, you know, tonight really, we're looking for some general direction that, okay, yeah, we like these two, we like those three. Start working on it, start putting it together, and we would be coming back to the council to talk more specifics on this in the future. But again, recognizing we have limited council meetings between now and the January 6th deadline of when this is due.
Okay, thank you. Question for Manager Burt. Is the motion in the package that says to recommend a resolution authorizing staff to apply for the Community Investment Fund grant, is that specific enough? Or is it, since he's looking for direction, do you want it to state?
Does it matter in the application process? What, do they require our resolution? Would it show more support to break it out?
I'm trying to remember, I think this one may have had a specific resolution associated with it, and if it did, we would need to take that back to you.
But for now, you just do it, what's in there.
What's in there?
Figure out
Yes.
Right,
what's,
so at the regular council meeting, we'll have
Do
the
the
specifics.
resolution.
Okay, okay. So I'll just throw this on the floor to recommend a resolution. I make a motion to recommend a resolution authorizing staff to apply for the Community Investment Fund grant, so moved.
Second.
Kasiri.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Kasiri. Okay, any discussion? Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a general question, and it was exciting to hear the TVCCA, where they're at, and this money can apply to it. So just a general question on grants. When you get awarded this grant, or if they got money from some other place, are there restrictions that come with these grants, or is it, you just basically have a pile of money and you can apply it to your construction project? Can you just, are these grants different than other grants, and what you can do with it?
There's always strings attached. There's always restrictions. And that's something that, as we move forward, DECD usually has language we have to sign, we have to review, work with our legal counsel, and if there were any restrictions that were out of the ordinary, that's something, we'd want to definitely talk with legal counsel. If it was something really big, we would want to take it to the council, put it on everybody's radar to understand what it is. But usually something like this, I think the biggest, restriction or kind of strings attached are, you're going to do what you said you're going to do. So if we received a $3 million grant for, Groton Heights remediation for development partnership with Thayer Mahan and all that investment, and instead we use that money to turn that building, to knock down the building and turn it into a public park. Nobody's proposing to do that. Extreme example.
Right.
They would say, we want that money back. That's not what you said you were going to do.
Okay. So you can't, once you've sort of assigned it or gone, made the grant application for X, you really need to just work with X. And
Yes, for this round. I mean, there might be, with projects this large, the state may allow some modifications of some of the details depending on, environmental conditions that come up, things along those lines. But if we're applying for a project at a specific site, looking at uses generally, that's what they're going to be looking for.
okay. And you had mentioned last time they were looking for projects that did economic development in the community, were significant impacts in the community. And you, I think all three of these that you've done have sort of seemed to follow under those guidelines that, especially the second one would be.
The word the state continues to use is transformative.
Okay.
They probably say it every minute in their webinars, so they want this to be big and to make a big splash and a big difference in a community.
So if we went under those guidelines, just looking at what you have here, I would say that the TVCCA would make probably the biggest, most visible splash in our community and probably the biggest gain. I mean, the Pleasant Valley site's a bunch of dirt. So you wouldn't really see it, other than a developer would know it's ready to go, so.
Oh, no, I think actually both Groton Heights and Pleasant Valley would both make significant splashes because of the multiplier effect. So, Groton Heights, Thayer Mahan is going to be investing $10+ million into that site over their full buildup. And Pleasant Valley, if we looked at doing some type of multifamily affordable housing development, you could see $30 to $60 million invested in that site going towards meeting some of that housing need that we have, both for market rate and affordable, both, again, humongous splashes. When we talk to and are on calls, webinars with Pfizer, with Electric Boat, things that we're hearing the need of their employees, they need daycare and they need housing. And right there, that's two of
They hit
those.
two buttons, so, okay. All right.
Thank you. Counselor Franco?
Thank you. I'm excited that you've gone and figured out how TVCCA can fit into this from our last meeting. The discussion brought that forward. And question I have, first, let me just state, I think our motion needs to be amended also to state that it gives the town manager authority to sign the grant application, because that's usually in every motion that we have that comes forward for a grant, even at the cow. But the question I have is about Pleasant Valley. I am in favor of the demolition and the cleanup and the remediation. And then you took it to the step of affordable housing and actually listed a criteria for it. And the issue is, that would mean tonight we're making a decision on what our RFP process would be and putting the criteria of what our RFP would be. And we haven't received back from the committee their recommendation for what the process should be. And I am concerned about that because there are, comments that have been made from people in that neighborhood, and they want their voices to be heard as well. So that, when it comes to Groton Heights, I'm all in favor because we're at that place where this is what they seem to need. And I think TVCCA, we've known about what they're doing, and I think this would be a great partnership, as you've stated. For the Pleasant Valley one, That one concerns me, because then we're making the decision tonight for the RFP criteria, and I am not comfortable with that. So I am in favor of the first and the second one, but not Pleasant Valley. So thank you.
No, and I know last time we had a little bit of this discussion, and I was putting it back out there because I think it's a great opportunity, and, you know, I put that 20% number out there as a recommendation, but also as a bit of a conversation starter. I think as we look at our affordable housing plan, our housing market analysis, some of the recommendations in there were the redevelopment of our school and excess properties to require a percentage of affordable housing in those, all of those moving forward. Whether we commit to a certain percentage if we applied for this, or if we just said we are committed to building some affordable housing in there. I do think if we put a minimum of 20%, which might sound like a lot, but it's not really a lot, and that's, you know, a minimum of, I think it gives us a much stronger application. So, you know, I put that out there. I don't know what our next steps are from a community to how to receive some public feedback on how much affordable housing should go in Pleasant Valley. If we put this out there, if we get the grant, we could always say no, but in order to make it a transformational and very competitive project, the state wasn't looking for just multifamily housing. They were looking for affordable. So that's why I put it out there, but again, up to the council's discretion. If you just want us to move forward with the top two, we will certainly do our best with those two. I know I'm not trying to push back. I think we have a great opportunity here, and I don't want to miss it.
Which I fully understand, but I think it's just the timing of it, in that we haven't gotten a response back from the committee on what they're recommending. And, I mean, we put out RFPs before that we didn't have criteria, and for all we know, somebody could want manufacturing there, or they could want housing there. I mean, whoever thought Groton Heights would become a manufacturing site? And that is one thing that I've heard. Sometimes you don't limit it to certain things, and you open it up and you see what people want, developers, because they're the ones spending the money, and see what they're offering and willing to do in our community. So, but to put the criteria in there right now, that means that we're making the decision right now of what we're going to do with Pleasant Valley. And I'm just not comfortable with that. So thank you, though.
I should also say, if memory serves correct, that property is zoned multifamily. So there is a limitation on there on the uses, and the majority of the uses are multifamily.
It's multifamily, it's not commercial.
For Pleasant Valley, if memory serves correct, that's zoned multifamily.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor McBride?
Thank you. I'm in favor of all of these, and I think it's an early start, so I understand what Councilor Franco's stating is, but, I think it's just moving down the path, and so I'd be supportive of all three. I just have a question on the Groton Heights School remediation and Bill Memorial Library upgrades. Why was there linkage of the two of them together? What was the purpose for that? And what are the upgrades for the Bill Memorial Library? Just from my own understanding.
So one, they're adjacent to each other. The two projects where we are actually working with the Bill Memorial Library, because there's a little bit of a land swap that needs to happen between the two in order to move that forward. And I think we saw Bill Memorial apply for, I think it was some broadband through ARPA.
Yes.
And we have a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss their needs, and if there's any other needs that might fall within the Community Investment Fund, that we could link the two projects, which are side by side, together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that, also the idea of making some broadband improvements was an idea that Thayer Mahan had early and included in their proposal to the town. So they had looked to do that partnership and to help them with some technological upgrades. So it's a natural fit from the beginning. It's just that we've been delayed, so we're trying to expedite that end of the project.
Thank you.
Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you just go over what the 10 to 15 million would be going towards for the TVCCA project?
Building construction, site improvements, drainage. Basically, I think what they're looking for with their draft plan is to demolish the existing buildings and start over.
Okay.
And, you know, build a bigger facility.
Great, thank you. I feel like I'm kind of struggling with Counselor Franco. We're kind of jiving on the same page here. I emphasized earlier in the night about our need for affordable housing, for income-limited housing, for our housing shortages. I think my strongest concern at this point is the longevity of the project of Pleasant Valley, because this council has another year, and ultimately, we could have 9 new bodies coming in here in a year. You know, because elections have consequences, and we've seen some movement of some trends of not wanting development in certain places. I do respect highly that you're looking at the process that you've already gone through for Pleasant Valley, and that you're looking at the feedback that has already come in from that, especially because we've heard about wanting playgrounds in the area and wanting more of a community feel to that section. So what you're saying is that we could apply and then ultimately not accept the grant if we're seeing that there is maybe not the appetite for that project in the future?
You certainly could. I think, you know, so the council has gone through the entire process of public hearings. The council approved the sale of the property, not to a specific person, but has authorized to sell the property.
Right.
The RTM did not veto that, so you have the ability to sell the property. Then you can decide as a council 6 months from now, hey, we want to put out an RFP for this property for, you know, we know there's a strong need in town for housing. You've heard it from us time and time again. We talked about it at last week's RTM meeting, both housing, affordable housing. You can put out an RFP, and normally I would 100% agree with what Council Franco said about, you know, we don't want to limit things within the RFP, but I think that's a site that is very ripe and is a good developable piece for multifamily housing. So I think we could, if we said we want to address that need as a community, that's a great site for it. We can specify, all right, developers, we've have money to knock down the building, to remediate the site, and to put X amount of dollars towards the construction of what would be a minimum of 20% deed restricted units, or whatever number you'd want to pick, and put that in the RFP. That's going to be very attractive that we have that kind of money going to the table, or we could do some of that work ourselves, knocking down the building, but then you're certainly locked into it. If we accepted the money, the state has also indicated they realize this money is not going to get spent in 6 months' time. Put that RFP out, we get the proposals in, and then, yeah, you know what, this isn't exactly what we're looking for. We could always back out of that. I don't want to go into the saying, oh, we're going to apply, but if we get $5 million, we might just give it back. You know, that's where it's up to you to decide how long do we want to wait to make a decision on what we think as a council is right for the site based on some of the feedback you've had. Do you want to apply for something now and know that you might get some feedback after? Again, looking for direction because it's such a great opportunity. I don't want to not bring it up.
I think about how we've already gone through this process once, and we had multiple developers look at the property. They all came to similar conclusions. And it's public knowledge that our number one decided not to invest in Groton. All of the developers that submitted proposals proposed to demolish the building. Actually, there are 3 buildings. So none of them said, you know, I think this is a great building, I want to keep it. They all said, we need to remove these buildings, they're of no value to us. As a result of that, you know, we're going to give you town X, but we're assuming the liability. If we reduce that liability, my sense is we're going to become more competitive in attracting whatever investment or investors we want to bring in as developers, and they're all going to want that building gone. So I think that gives us, if we receive the funding and we move forward with the demolition, it's going to put us in a strong position no matter what direction the council and the town wants to go in. I think that's the most compelling story.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it's just super important that we can try and move the town into a position of getting income-limited housing, of getting more affordable housing. My fear is just, again, with the longevity of the project, I mean, if you're not concerned about a future council pushing back on getting more housing, then, okay, I totally trust your expertise in the area. I'm just fearful for a new 9, and that's my real concern. And the other projects, completely 100% on board with.
Do I expect pushback? Certainly. I've never seen a housing development that I've not seen pushback on.
Right.
Everybody wants affordable housing, but just not near them. Everybody understands the need for market rate and, you know, mixed income housing, but generally just not near them. Or the next community over can build it to meet our housing demands. Well, we need to do something to meet our housing demands. So that, again, I don't mean to be overly pushy. I just, as Paige said, you know, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, so anyway.
Well, thank you.
You know my stance on it.
Thank you for your responses. Appreciated.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. You know, for me, since I've been up here, I've not seen low income or true affordable housing really come to before us in any type of development plan to date. Is that true? Everything that's come up has been more like, you know, kind of more high dollar, you know, apartment complexes, but nothing's been low income or affordable.
Yeah, everything's
right.
been market rate.
Right. So some of
Except-
the
yeah.
opposition and stuff that's come before, you know, there really hasn't been a straight proposal yet that's come, or an RFP that I've seen that's been low income affordable. What I'm really looking for is low income, because low income is not affordable. It's two different mathematical breakdowns, and one of the things we need is higher rates of low income and affordable. The crisis we're having in Brantford Manor, currently, the 20% of affordable housing would not be affordable to Brantford Manor tenants. They need low-income housing. So, I think that that's a great property for possibility of low-income housing, because it's on the bus route and it's in great, you know, walking distance to jobs and things like that, but I'm not sure. I also can agree that there hasn't been the due diligence or process on that to really define. You know, the things that came to us before did not fit the affordable or the low-income threshold for those properties. With that, my question is how will this break down? What if we decide that only one of these fits the criteria?
One of,
The options that you proposed tonight?
if one of the three, then the council tells us which one you want us to apply for, and we apply for it.
Okay, and that doesn't change that you could get more maybe for the one versus the three?
More,
I guess I'm just trying to understand the process and the money bank, right, that we put out. If we go to the state with 3 proposals versus 1, is there a chance we can get more for 1, or is it spread evenly between 3, or is it equally divided, or how would it work?
no, I think each one stands on its own. That's how they're looking at these, because each one of these projects is its own independent project. We had asked the state of, you know, in some other applications, do we tie them together in a much larger project, or do we bring it forward as individual projects? So for example, New Haven received a project in the award amount of $2.13 million. They received another $1.5 million, another project for $1 million, another project for $10 million, another for $500,000, another for $3 million, another for $780,000, another for $155,000, another for $312,000. All that was New Haven in round 1.
20 million.
Yeah. Waterbury received a project for 10 million. Middletown, a $12 million project, and I think that was the only one in Middletown. So we can get multiple projects, and I don't think if we submit 3, that it's necessarily going to hurt us versus if we only submit 1. There's always strategy that goes into applying for grants, and this is one that I truly feel that we submit what we can now. If we submit 3 now, if that's how the council told us to move forward, next July in round 3, we'd probably be talking to you about somewhere between 1 and 3 additional projects. In round 4, maybe we take round 4 off. Round 5, we'd probably be talking to you about more projects. In round 7, in round 8, and round 9. So this is something that we intend to apply for with whatever projects we think can be transformational projects, make a big splash, the council's behind, and that we think we can actually get funded for. We did come forward in the community challenge grant that we had applied for about a month or so ago, not even. That one did actually have affordable housing associated with it, with the Groton Housing Authority. So that was one, but that's something that they will be building as opposed to something that was through an excess school property.
Is there any true plan to put something forward in our town that you guys are thinking of that's true low-income housing?
At this point in time, we don't have a plan or a site for true low-income housing. We're open to suggestions and direction from the council, but you know, the 2 types of affordable housing, we've spoken about this before. Affordable housing, deed-restricted housing, usually you're thinking about 80% of area median income or below. The low-income housing that you're talking about, the low-income kind of branch of affordable housing, that housing has to have a monthly subsidy associated with each one of the units. So whether it's HUD, Section 202, Section 8 voucher, those are other very competitive processes. And if that's something that the council wanted to see get built at Pleasant Valley, a portion of that, well, that's something that we could put in the RFP. That, you know, somebody will get scored higher if you're looking for this. But I think those are the details to figure out later. If we're talking about 20% affordable housing, well, right now, we can say, all right, well, the threshold is at least 20% affordable housing. What the makeup of that is, you can decide that later on in the process, however you want to do that. But there's not money from this program to pay for Section 8 vouchers for the next 30 years. So that's not something that this program can pay for. That's other federal funds, different types of projects.
Okay, so the one on here that I definitely can 100% support with enough information and, you know, there's a plan, there's a drawing, would definitely be number 2 would be the TVCCA. I think that's a strong project. You know, again, this is a project that's not going to, not everyone's going to be able to utilize based on income. So if you're higher income over a certain threshold, you may not qualify for this programming. There is a strong need for affordable childcare in our community, and this fits that need, the TVCCA model. And there's a plan and a need, and you know, other municipalities already have a newer structure, so we're kind of a little bit behind the curve on that. So that is something 100% I can say I support. I'm still kind of up in the air on the school remediation at Groton Heights. I'm still kind of, I feel like there's just still more missing information. Maybe there's something else you can fill me in on that kind of partnership. You know, they agreed to the property, but then they couldn't afford to do the remediation. I do think the former Pleasant Valley is a gold mine, a diamond in the rough, and a great property, but I do think that we need to listen to the community around there and make sure that certain sections that are kept in open space for parks, as well as maybe a mixed model use with the affordable, low income, and, you know, market rate housing. But I just don't feel right now we have enough information for me to make a direct go as to what. I wish we'd had another meeting prior to this, another one to discuss it, but thank you.
Council Westervelt?
Thank you. I believe all 3 of these projects have a lot of benefit for the town. Obviously, TVCCA is perfect for this, and I do appreciate Groton Heights. As for Pleasant Valley, I believe that by the time we get to the point where we might have to put a RFP out, I believe our process will be complete and it'll be submitted. So I don't think there's any hazard with that. I would rather ask for it, and if we have to turn it down later, we can, but I don't think it would go that far. Or, I mean, I don't think that we would have to do that. So I'm in support of it because I think it's a great idea, and I'd rather ask for the money, have the chance of it being given to us, and then if we can't use it, then we can't use it. So I'm in support of all three of these.
Counselor Parker?
For Westfall, I think go ahead and submit all three. And if we can't do Pleasant Valley, then we'll say that. We can always turn the money back in. On grants, if you don't use all your money, refund it back to the state anyways. Thank you.
Counselor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As was mentioned earlier, there will be several funding rounds. So this program just started. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that will be distributed, I should say, to communities throughout our state. You mentioned New Haven already at the top of the list, getting so many critical projects funded, and there's no reason why Groton can't have that same problem as well. So I think for starters, I very much support the TVCCA child care facility. It seems like there is pretty broad support for the project already. And obviously, they've done their due diligence already, demonstrating that they have the capacity to get funding at the federal level that could certainly supplement maybe some of the asks we would have. So that way, down the road, we can also fund other projects as well. I would also venture to say that because there will be future rounds, I think this is an opportunity for the town to look at some of the other projects that or proposals or ideas that counselors, community members, town staff have had over the last year or two. In particular, I know when we first started out as a council, we had a lot of discussions about whether it was appropriate to acquire certain properties that have been for sale for some time in town that can be utilized for housing needs, can be utilized for passive recreational needs such as sports fields, such as other athletic facilities for our youngsters and all community members. So I would also say, why not also include in that Clodchester remediation? Why not throw out the idea to acquire certain properties along that Route 1 corridor that can enhance the quality of life here in our community, more places for our community, our community members to live in, work in, play in. And so I would kind of expand and broaden a little bit too, see if that could be a possibility. And there's one other item. I think that covered it. So yes, Clodchester remediation I would put on the table, other property acquisitions, and I would even add the community center to that list as well. Certainly we've, I think all have supported utilizing the space and maximizing the space, but obviously there's a big dollar amount to attach to that as well. So maybe that could offset some of the costs. So good problem to have again, but very much I think at the initial phase support the TVCCA child care facility proposal.
Thank you. I'll take my turn now. I'll just say I cannot be more supportive of all three of these projects. I guess I'll speak on Pleasant Valley since that's the one getting the most pushback. We need low-income housing in Groton. We need affordable housing in Groton. We need market rate housing in Groton. We need all types of housing in Groton. And I don't think we're in a position to turn down the opportunity to spend money, to apply for grant money in order to make one of the properties that we own more competitive to sell. Just me personally, I think that 20% is too low. I think it needs to be higher than 20%. But certainly that's a good start. And I just can't, I would be very disappointed if this council decides to turn down an opportunity to apply for grant money that can spearhead a project that can bring affordable housing and market rate housing to our community. Thank you. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions. Once you apply for a project, are you able to reapply for that in future rounds, or is it, once done, is it done?
Yeah, they actually have a mechanism in place for this grant project so that it's easier to reapply for the same project. Obviously, if we did not get funded for whichever project we apply for in round two, we're going to ask some questions of why. Is there something we could have done to make our application better, stronger? And then if we can revise, otherwise, if it's good, but just there were more competitive projects in round two, we would just resubmit for round three.
So the luck
And
of the
round
draw
four.
may just be that you just can't get it because some other town was more needy or had a bigger need for that kind of a project.
Correct. And one of the things we brought up at the last meeting, so the state was planning on rolling the majority of the projects from round one that didn't get funded into round two's application. So every time we wait, that application pool keeps getting bigger and bigger. So what might be a highly competitive application now might not be such a highly competitive application in round six. So again, part of the reason we're pushing on some of these now, I think all of these, there's good questions that have come up from all council members on all of these, all very valid questions. But we don't have to have answers for everything now, because if we get the grant, you are still holding all the strings, all the decisions. You still have to decide to enter into a purchase and sales agreement with Thayer Mahan. You still have to decide to issue an RFP for Pleasant Valley and whatever the parameters are for that. You still have to approve a lease for Thames, Valley Community Council for Community Action. So with all of these, there's still a lot of decisions that you all have to make. This is just step one of a multiple step process for every single one of these.
And I think if I'm hearing you right, it's worth putting these projects in, especially like a TVCCA now, and if you don't get it, we might get it on round 5, as opposed to sort of gambling and saying, we'll do it on round 5, hoping we get it there. It's better to get it here, tweak it, and then if you don't
Yes.
get it, just put it at a later round. Can you just sort of give us a sense of how many different grant programs the town is applying to? I mean, I know we have this one, you had the other one a month ago. How many do you have sort of ongoing at any one time?
We'll be talking to about 2 different DEEP grants that we're working on, for one to match funding for a climate action plan, another one to do some, Megan Granato, our sustainability and resiliency manager, has been working on that, as well as another round of that for actual implementation of some climate action strategies. There's the Community Challenge Grant, there's this funding, there's CDBG, with Groton Housing Authority. There was, even though we received the DEEP grant for the acquisition of the Wolfbrook property, we're still working on that. So it's like, hey, wow, all the hard work is done. We applied for the grant, we got it. No, that was the easy part. The hard work is then taking that grant and the process through. We're working on the grant-funded project for the Mystic Resiliency Study right now. And there's probably some other grants that we're working on right now that aren't coming
So
off
is
the top
that
of my head.
primarily the function of the planning department in the town? That's one of your major roles that you play, is looking for these grants and applying and trying to bring the money into.
It can be. Right now, all of these grants, all this money that's out there right now, I've been doing this for 25 years. I started when I was like 2. So, I've never seen grant money out there like this before.
Yeah.
So there's things that we're looking at, where are our priorities? Where can we be transformational for Groton? We've heard for years, why isn't this happening? Why isn't downtown? Why isn't Pequannock Bridge? Why don't we have this? well, we have money to implement these things that's out there right now. We're very competitive. We're a great community. Let's put our best foot forward and apply for these things. Because if we don't apply for them, when the money's gone, I wish we had.
Yeah. No, I thank you for all the effort that you do and keep bringing these grants to us. I think it just helps our community, improves everything, and just gives us opportunities to have development and projects that are, move the whole town forward. Just one last question. We've talked about affordable and market rate and low income. Are those definitions and better explanation of that in the report that you wrote 6 months ago, I guess, that affordable housing? I just want to educate myself a little bit more. I know there's a lot of definitions and a lot of different things going on. Is that the best place to look for that
That's
information?
probably the best place to look for it. If you look in there and you can't find something that truly describes it, let us know. We'll either find it in the report or we'll put together a short memo or an explanation of the different types and categories of affordability.
Yeah, just sort of a guide. I mean, you were even, the comments a little earlier where it needed to have matching funds from the federal government and all that kind of stuff. So just having a better understanding of that would be helpful. So I'll look there first, and if not, then I'll just reach out.
Yeah.
So.
No, on a lot of these, it's, you start diving down rabbit holes. There's a lot to each single category and specialization with it, so.
Okay.
The HUD acronym book is about that thick.
Great. All right, thank you.
Counselor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, so we, the town, are trying to sell Groton Heights, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, and we, as the sellers, would want to make it more appealing to the buyer, which is Thayer Mahan. And so it would make a lot of sense to help it make it more appealing to the buyer. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
And I think somebody had asked a question about, why so much, we need more details, the environmental costs. We had initially applied, I think we talked about this briefly last time, we had initially applied for a brownfields grant to clean up the property. I think we got that increased to $250,000. Right. And then once Thayer Mahan went in there and started doing some testing, had some contractors look at the scope of it, oh wow, it was a lot more, significantly more. Their prices were ranging close to $2 million to do the full remediation, cleanup, mold remediation. And every month that goes by, more water leaks in through the roof, the building deteriorates further, and the further we wait, the more expensive it becomes, and at some point, it's not worth it anymore. So, again, great opportunity, and that's initially when they were looking at it, they thought, oh, okay, it's $250,000 of remediation. Oh wow, we get a grant, maybe it's a little more, we can cover that. $2 million on them, that's a lot to ask for on a project that the first phase is between $6 and $8 million for total construction.
Right, right. And they were willing to invest that money when they thought it was going to be somewhat minimal, but
Yeah.
now it's too much. Understood. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Counselor Bordelon?
Thank you. Is there a limit to the number of projects that we could propose?
Not to my knowledge.
So I think with Counselor Baumgartner's recommendation of, what comes to mind is sports fields, right? I mean, has there been any collaboration with the school to maybe put that on the list as well, the enhancement of sports fields?
I do not believe the enhancement of sports fields would be an eligible project for
What
this
about,
grant.
maybe I said the word wrong, like a construction of new sports fields?
Yeah, I don't think that would be an eligible project. This is really an economic development, job creation, affordability, transformative project. Although Groton needs sports fields, I've been hearing that since day one that I started working here. I see it, I see the conditions of our fields. That's not a project that would fall under the eligibility for this grant.
What about the Clawchester?
If we were proposing to build sports fields, demolish the building, and also build housing and affordable housing on the site all combined together, okay, I can make that pitch. But right now, if all we're talking about is building sports fields on the site, I do not think that's an eligible project.
Right, I'm just kind of going through some of the hot button items, to kind of weed out. What about the community center?
We do think that's an eligible project, and that's something we'll be looking at probably in round 3 or round 4. We've reached out to Parks and Rec, and we've been talking to some theater groups about what the possibilities are there. So that's something that we've already been doing some due diligence on. And, you know, and there are other projects that we have been looking at and considering, but we just don't have enough information yet to start moving those projects forward in round 2.
So would there be any reason not to put the community center on in this round and make it 4 items?
I don't think we have enough information to make it a competitive, viable application yet at this point in time.
Just as a reminder, they're working, Public Works and Parks and Rec are working with an architect right now to lay it out, and we don't have firm numbers until that process goes, or even good conceptual numbers until that process completes. So hopefully for the next round.
Thanks for that. I guess my question is, like, we really don't have anything firm for Pleasant Valley. I mean, we have a thought, and we're saying we should move forward with a thought. And we had other, you know, possible buyers, but it was not affordable housing or a market rate for, you know, it was more higher end. So I was just wondering, you know, as it was stated, put it forward, and if we have to reject, we can roll it back after. It just would seem that the community center we could put in, and that the creation of that would be coming. So I was just trying to see where, you know, by adding that in now, you know, we are, like you said, losing out on opportunity. If it's in the works, Pleasant Valley is we're kind of guessing. We don't have a buyer on hand, we have no site plans, we have no one that's even told us that they're willing to do affordable housing there yet. We just know that we can demolish the building. But with the community center, we've had all these different phases that were addressed at one point, way back when I got on the RTM over 4.5 years ago. And we had phases and plans of, like, we're gonna do this piece and that piece, and we, you know, that would enhance, that'd be a huge splash for our community, is to have a properly functioning, working community center in a building that's, you know, quite old. So I'm just trying to see how they're different.
So with Pleasant Valley, we have some good general cost estimates of what it would take to demolish the building. We actually have some really nice site plans from the proposals that had come in as examples of what could be done on the site. We have an idea of what site development cost would be for Pleasant Valley. For the community center, we have no idea what the cost would be. We don't know exactly what's going to go where. So I think the two are very different. We have a good grasp on the level of cost and what the ask would be for Pleasant Valley. We don't have that any hard numbers for the community center.
Okay, I think it's great, I mean, that we have someone working on it now, but it'd be great to it'd be helpful if we had the information so that we're not losing out and kind of thinking, you know, that pre-planning and having stuff kind of already packaged up. Because this community center's been going on for like many years now, and we're missing out on grant opportunities on the front end here, so. If that's the case and we don't have the documentation to support it, then we can't move it, but I guess I just wanted to make sure to ask. Is there any other projects that you're foreseeing that you'll be asking for in round 2 that you're not proposing tonight?
In round 2, no.
In the next round that you said you could add in when we have another opportunity?
As we discussed at the last meeting on this, we've been in communication with the city, talking about some projects on Thames at 5 Corners. We don't have anything specifically laid out yet, but we know that that area is ripe for this type of grant process.
All right.
That's probably the biggest other one that's hanging out there at this point in time. There's some other things that we're still brainstorming and trying to come up with exact projects.
Okay. And there's been no other sites identified for affordable housing as of yet either?
We have other excess properties that the town owns. If the council wants to suggest any of those for affordable housing, we're all ears.
Is, based on your recommendation, is there anything that you guys see as viable spots that could be, you know, put forward as a grant to enhance our affordable housing market?
Yes, I think we have opportunities, but it's all, you know, what does the council want to do? Again, Some of them I've mentioned multiple times tonight and at last week's meeting. I mean, again, we went through a public process trying to get some feedback and input on the Claude Hester site. There's other ways of utilizing that site or portions of that site. There's SB Butler School. We have not even begun that discussion of that property. That would be a phenomenal site for affordable housing, whether it's any type. But again, what's the direction of the council? What are you looking for?
All right. I thank you for that. I'm still a little torn with the number 3 item, but if it can go forward and there's no strings attached, and we're just basically applying open-endedly based on former people who had come forward with purchase agreements and, RFPs and all that, and we're kind of assuming that we can use that kind of structure with an idea, it still would have to be voted on down the road once we got, so there would be no strings attached at this time. So
And that's exactly where we are. We know that there's a need for it. We know that there's interest in it.
Right.
How you, the council, want to move that forward if we get the grant through some type of RFP process that you dictate, you decide what's in there.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it's one of the things that said, here's a grant, here's your deadline, and, there's no public input. It's kind of, just make a decision on the fly, so it's kind of tough to not really know, but if there's no attachment, then I guess there's no harm in applying. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Franco.
Thank you. Is there any way to do Pleasant Valley site under brownfield remediation and take the school down and all that without having to state you're going to put affordable housing in there?
We could apply for it. Well, brownfield is different. That's a different grant application. I don't know what the state has right now for brownfield-specific grants. The last that we saw, I
Well,
think.
it says in this application here, it says brownfield remediation.
Yes.
That's one of the items, and then it's affordable housing, and it lists all the items, and that's why I'm asking, can you take the affordable housing out there? And it's not that I have an issue with the affordable housing there, it's that we're stating it has to be that in an RFP process, and that's what I don't want to do tonight. I don't think if we're going to put housing over on that site, I think we should potentially put the RFP out like we did last time and see what we get back, and don't limit it, because we don't know what the market rate is right now. As we're hearing from TVCCA, they went from 8 million to 16 million in 1 year. And if the cost of building housing is that expensive right now, I don't know what we're gonna get and how much they're gonna need on a return on investment when they do get in there. So I get remediating and taking the building down is a great thing to have, entice people to come to the land. But my question being is, can you do it without attaching the type of housing?
Yes, we can. Do I think it severely lowers our competitiveness? I do.
Because I hear what people are saying about potentially just applying for it and then returning it. Can't imagine that we're gonna return it, but that also makes it that we're making a decision tonight without actually going through a process that they've been working on, and even Counselor McBride mentioned, we're deciding a property without going, while they've been working on this plan, and we're not gonna go through, we're just gonna do it. And that's what my issue is. You're making the decision tonight, and I get we could work on some things in the future, but then we're stuck. That's exactly it. That's the criteria for that RFP. And you don't know, they could be building houses or they could be building apartment buildings, and I don't know what market rate is right now and what is even could be done in the next couple of years, the way things are going. So I would go forward with the application if the consensus is to include Pleasant Valley, but I have very big reservations about this, and I don't want it to be known that I'm making a decision tonight on what should go there.
Counselor Baumgartner?
I think we heard tonight as well, I forgot who mentioned it, but even if the resolution tonight is not highly specified about what 3 projects or, what our preferences as far as applications or, what projects would be submitted to the state, we still have time. We have a few weeks, 2 weeks to chew on, what certainly town staff shared this evening. And when it comes to our regular council meeting, there will be a fully fleshed out resolution and the opportunity for all councilors to weigh in at that moment as well, to be more specific. So I think we all heard a consensus from everyone that, there is a project that has support, but that doesn't mean other projects don't have the support either. So maybe we can kind of chew on it a little bit, get the process rolling, get the ball moving, and then the regular council meeting, we'll have the opportunity to kind of submit make our final case as far as what projects we'll be submitting to the state for review. So that's what I would recommend, and I'd certainly agree with Mayor Melendez, and I think most councilors here in stating that, we need to be serious about investing in our affordable housing stock. Obviously, the good chunk of the work we've done in this council has centered around housing this year, more than any time I've been involved in local government, and certainly, at the council level. And so, this is also an opportunity to move forward. And, as much as we've been beating the drum, highlighting the injustices that we've seen in many of our, in our communities where there is affordable housing, this is an opportunity to flesh out a plan and come together and work on behalf of the people, we represent. So I'm glad we're moving forward with this and not just foregoing applying it all, because we'd really be leaving a lot of money on the table. And there's no shortage of obviously really worthy projects that are worth funding. So, thank you.
I just have a point of information.
What's your point of information?
What meeting, what date would that be that we would have this come back before us?
December
6th, I believe.
6th?
And then my other part to that would be, is it possible to add a section under there about our grants that we're proposing, and if people want to come speak about it, they could?
That's a public comment meeting.
Is there a way to add like a public hearing on it? You could add it at that meeting as well?
I think you could. I don't know.
I mean, it wouldn't be just wouldn't be the final say, it just would be a way to give the public a little taste of what's to be coming. And it would be thrown out on the floor and put in the paper, and a great way to, bring the community in on these great grant opportunities.
Thank you. John, is scheduling a public hearing something that needs to be in the agenda packet? Or is that something we can do because this is in the agenda?
Well, the problem is you have to pass a you can get us guidance, but otherwise it's, you need a resolution to officially do it.
To do a public hearing?
Right.
Okay, so
So, usually a public hearing has more of a legal connotation, though. I think it's more of just a separate public input session.
okay. So we can't do it because we can only approve a public, from my understanding right now, we can only approve a public hearing at a council meeting. This is a CAL meeting. So, yep.
We could certainly I assume we could certainly advertise, though, what's out there, what we're looking at, and, essentially make sure we treat it like the public comment, like an actual public hearing, to let people know what's going on.
right.
Just another point of information. All right, so that if it's informal, it doesn't have to be legal. It can just, I've seen where they just say that we're doing an information night, so that there's the regular public comment, and it doesn't have to be called a public hearing. Couldn't it be called something else and just say, we have the opportunity for some grants, and we are opening up the floor at this time for people to just comment?
It's public comment night. People can certainly come and comment, and they usually do, about anything that's on our agenda. Whoever's watching right now, feel free to come out and certainly comment on your thoughts on this. I don't think we can schedule specifically a public hearing. But Councilor Parker, did you have a hand?
I just had one more part for the town manager. If he's going to advertise it so that people know.
Yes, he said he would.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Councilor Parker, was that a hand?
It was, but you already answered it, or stated it, I should say. Thank you.
Okay. So My question here is, did we have 5 counselors express interest in all 3 projects?
I would support all 3 after what I heard.
Okay,
Yes.
so is that the direction you needed? Okay, so then we can vote on the motion to recommend a resolution authorizing staff to apply for the Community Investment Fund grant. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On to the American Rescue Plan Act project awards process.
I didn't hear consensus of hearing.
I'll kick this one off. I'll give a little background to how we got to where we're at today with this. And first to just to also introduce tonight, we're really just talking about how does the council want to move forward process-wise. We were not expecting to delve into individual projects. We're a little too early on that. But obviously, if you funnel any questions, ongoing, we'll answer them. But tonight's just how do we want to move forward. We all know what happened in March of 20. Shortly after that, through an emergency declaration, I formed the Long-Term Recovery Committee, which had pretty broad representation. There was quite a bit of early effort we put into dealing with COVID. For instance, we were already using NAVA Retail to do some studies. We had them do one in August of 20, gauge COVID impacts, try to get an idea of where the needs are for businesses. We also had a CDBG personal protection equipment grant for $150,000 that we were able to provide some equipment around. And then we invited partner nonprofit agencies, a variety of businesses to come give input to see what their needs were. And then as we were doing in the middle of that, in March of 21, I believe it was, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed, like March 11th. And basically that was for 5 broad categories. It was for responding to the public health emergency and negative economic impacts of COVID-19. And that has a wide variety of things that could fall under behavioral health, preventing and responding to violence, that type of thing. Replacement of lost revenue, premium pay, water and sewer infrastructure, and broadband infrastructure. And some of the prohibited uses included you can't pay down pension liabilities, no paying interest or principal on outstanding debt, no paying for consent decrees or legal settlements, and no contributing to a rainy day fund. So those are the prohibited uses. Early on, it looked like the funds were going to be a little more restrictive, but by the time the final rules came out, they established the standard allowance, if you remember that, for the $10 million, which gave more flexibility. You didn't have to do a calculation for revenue lost and go through some of the other processes. And you can use up to $10 million for pretty much any service traditionally provided by government, so it's very broad compared to what we thought early on. Groton was awarded a little under $8.6 million. There was also some money separately that went to the Board of Ed, as well as Groton Public Library. So as we knew about the money, and once we got the final rule, we started working through the Long-Term Recovery Committee and the council on how did we want to proceed. You'll see in the packet that flow chart under the process that we agreed on generally. It doesn't break down though like what exactly would happen at the council meeting. We went through a needs assessment and allocation plan, and there's a lot of incredible amount of input, public outreach for that. 2 open houses, online engagement website, running ads, mailers, Groton TV. I know our ARPA coordinator, Kevin Fitzgerald, went to a variety, all kinds of events to get the word out there for that. And ultimately, for the survey, we adopted, the Long-Term Recovery Committee adopted their own 5 buckets for where to focus on to try to get input. That included human services, economic development, infrastructure, arts and culture, and parks and recreation. And we were focusing on a first round of approximately 1.9 to 2.4 million. And then, as you remember, we also had, or I sent out earlier today a sheet that says what we've already committed to like the capital projects for the ARPA coordinator, for COG, all the human services, all those things. But We've already allocated 5.14 million. Of course, 1.4 million of that was set aside for the seawall in the city. We still don't know exactly what's going on with that, what kind, if that money is going to be needed, and what level it would be needed. But, so Long-Term Recovery Committee they put out the application process. Once we received all those applications, they were scoring, each member of the committee scored those. They were ranked based first on the average score, and then the standard deviation to show how close people were on consensus on that. And ultimately, the committee made a recommendation for funding the top 20 scoring projects, which would equate to about that 2.4 million range. And that brings us to where we're at now, because the council, it's wide, that's the recommendation, but of course the council can do whatever you want and take whatever process you want. So we're looking for feedback to how you want to proceed. And I've got Paige and Kevin here to fill in things I've missed, if I got things incorrect.
I think that was a great overview of the program. I'll just hit on a couple points, and I'm sure Kevin has some comments as well. Unlike many other communities in eastern Connecticut anyway, we had gone through an extensive needs assessment process. That's not synonymous with a survey. As was mentioned, there were multiple levels involving that needs assessment, including Greater Groton, and there was a budget simulator where funding was allocated to individuals. They were asked how they're actually going to reduce the amount that was provided to them to align with certain priorities. Ultimately, through all of the information that was received, Kevin developed the needs assessment document, which you have in your packet. The RFP application was released on May 13th of this year, and there were 52 projects that were submitted. The total ask at that point in time was 7.2 million. As the town manager indicated, we were envisioning somewhere between 1.9 and 2.5. So we were way over the available funding that we were allocating. So highly competitive. Obviously, not everyone was going to receive what they were asking. Kevin had also provided the Long-Term Recovery Committee the one-page summaries, which I believe are also in your packet. That was an attempt to give somewhat of a thumbnail explanation of each ask. In addition, the full responses provided by the proposals were added to Greater Groton. So the committee was able to review the full proposals if they cared to in completing their scoring. Those scoring tabulations, by the way, did have criteria. So it was intended to try and provide some objectivity rather than simply, I like this project or I don't like that project. We tried to, as I said, add some objectivity to it, and ultimately the consensus of that group is what was provided to the long-term committee, and they ultimately are providing a recommendation to you regarding the top 20 prioritized projects. Kevin?
I'd like to share a little more about that framework we used for the Long-Term Recovery Committee to evaluate projects. We had 6 review criteria for 5 points each, with a total of 30 points. Those were community investment, which hits on the distribution of funds towards the community's needs, project risk, so any additional hurdles that would face a recipient after they've received the funding, organizational capacity, community goals, so to be alignment with established community plans and ability to accelerate them or enhance their impact for the community. Project sustainability, which is an important part of the Treasury's guidelines, is funding projects that aren't just short-term investments in their community, but can have a pronounced impact for years going forward. So really finding those opportunities to invest in the infrastructure, whether physical infrastructure or social infrastructure, that can have a long-term impact on the community. And finally, funding needs. So just the organization's accessibility to other funds, as well as if this project is truly reliant on ARPA funding to advance, or if there are other opportunities to receive these funding. Additionally, I just want to mention that the final rule provided that general government services standard allowance, which gave broad flexibility to identify government services, which really gave communities like Groton the opportunity to find the projects that really sync with or really address our impacts we faced during the pandemic and can move towards an equitable and resilient recovery. And I'd also be happy to answer any questions you might have about the projects or to share any additional information about the portfolio advanced by the LTRC.
All right. Thank you. I'll ask some questions first. First for Manager Burt, that total funds allocated 5.1 million. Is the seawall in there? The
Yes,
1.4?
it is.
Okay, so,
Now, that one's not through an approval process formally yet. It's been held to the side till we know what's going on with it, whereas the others have been fully approved.
okay, so theoretically, if we didn't have to use that money for the seawall, then the total funds unallocated plus the recommended contingency would be about 3.9 million?
I don't think we'll know in time for this round. I think what we would do is have a second round. So, but yes.
Right, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, okay, thank you. So the first thing I just want to say is, I want to thank Kevin for his work on this long-term recovery. We ranked each project in I think 6 different categories, and then we totaled the scores, and we got the average and the standard deviation. At the meeting, I just want to briefly explain why we came with the top 20. I believe the reasoning at that meeting was it took the amount of projects that expended all of the round 1 funding, and they sort of just cut it there and then moved all those forward. I think that that recommendation is certainly one way to go forward, but I think it might be better if we move further down the list. In order to do that, we'd have to utilize some sort of partial funding for projects and not fully fund the top 20 projects. But I think that there's lots of projects that didn't fall in the top 20 that certainly deserve money. One I can see is the request from the schools for enhanced security in the schools. I think it fell somewhere in the 30s, but I'm sure that will deserve some money. The other thing I just want to point out is on page, what page is this? 1 second. On page 65, okay, there's the breakdown of the proposed allocation from the Long-Term Recovery Committee, and also on page 70 is the breakdown of our allocations during the budget season on where they went into which category. And I just think that when we are putting the funding forward, I think we should be cognizant of trying to put those, make those graphs allocate in the same way that in the back, the community responses, there's graphs on which categories they thought should get the most money. And I think that we need to, like, for instance, our budget allocations overrepresented Parks and Recreation. So just, I want councilors to keep that in mind. All right, any other discussion? Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin, thank you. I can't get your last name.
Fitzgerald.
Huh? Oh, Fitzgerald, that's right, Kevin. All right, I just didn't want to just say Kevin. So thank you for all the work that you've done in this. I think it would have been helpful for us to, because what's missing in this packet was how the ranking was done in the categories that you had broken this down to figure out the rankings. So that methodology that you used isn't in this packet, or if it is, I can't seem to find it. But you have a score for everybody, and it would just be nice to have kind of had a better understanding of how you came up with those scores. Because this is the first time I've heard of the the 6 criteria that you use, because I don't think it's in here unless I missed it somewhere. So I just think it would be helpful in understanding how you came to pick these people.
Can I ask for a point of clarification? Are you asking how the criteria were derived?
Yes.
Or how the individual scores from each committee member were aggregated?
No, how the criteria was derived, like there's a ranking, there's an average score in here, and you gave everybody a rank, but there's no understanding in the packet of how you came up with that number until you just said it, unless it's,
Okay.
I'm missing
There
somewhere.
were 6 categories. We ranked 1 through 5 in each of the categories, and we added it up.
But
And
it
that
just
was our score.
been nice if it was in here, just to say, this is the criteria and how we did it. And you just didn't do that, so I think it just would have been helpful. To just take something that Mayor Melendez just said, when he's looking deeper into the list, do you have a sense here of how many of these projects needed their full funding or could do something with partial funding?
I do. The degree is variable to respond to inflation, so that number ebbs and flows with that, but I could tell you particular projects that would be feasible with partial funding. And could identify on a project-by-project basis.
I mean, it might be helpful if we are digging deeper into this list and spreading the money a little further, that some projects just can't happen if they don't have the full funding, and other projects could do 40% of their ask, or 80% of their ask. So that might be helpful if we do dig into this and go differently, just which projects are flexible and can have partial funding, and which ones are like, I'm sorry, that's the total money we need, and if we don't have that money, we can't do it. So that would be kind of helpful. And that goes along with the question of moving things around. Can you just explain a little bit the comment about that this money is supposed to be for support services provided by government, if I had that right? Just that these things get matched on to services that are provided by the government? I didn't, just maybe Mr. Burke can.
The framework for that, the Treasury introduced that, assuming that local governments experienced significant revenue loss during the pandemic. And that assumption was applied to every local government, even if they didn't experience that revenue loss. And so that proxy, per se, could be applied to government services as support for how they would be paying for the government services. But that definition is very broad. So something like a human service would still be considered a government service if it's being contracted by the government. So we have a great deal of flexibility to define that government service, but something, say, like an infrastructure improvement would have a much more direct relationship.
So I guess my question is, the programs that you have given money to, do they need to be things that could be provided by government service, but because of money we didn't do it, or do they kind of match up, or are they independent of services that are provided by the government? I guess I'm just confused.
They do not have to be services or projects that are directly provided by the government.
Okay.
In a simple term, basically, communities that received over $10 million, which is not Groton, had a stricter formula and adherence to the U.S. Treasury's final rule. There was almost a different process for how they had to document how they allocate their ARPA money. Communities that received less than 10 million received, I don't want to say a waiver, but some leniency, so to speak. So they basically could allocate funding to projects that met basically a government services type role, and it was intended to be a broad, vague objective. So I think all of the submittals that we have received meet that lower threshold of the under $10 million threshold. So I don't know if that helps answer that.
So basically above the 10 million, it's pretty strict in what you
Yes.
can do, and below the 10 million, you have flexibility to
lenient.
kind of do whatever you really want to do, so. okay.
Not anything, of course, but.
But I mean, in a community-based, around those,
Yes.
those 5 buckets that you had picked.
Yes.
Is it your intent on submitting this that this was your top 20 recommendation and that should be what moves forward? Or is it your understanding that we may move things around?
I will jump in, and I certainly defer to Kevin, he's our in-house expert, but my understanding is that the committee was looking to basically make the best investments they can with limited funds, and in an effort to expedite and make the first cut, they selected these 20 projects. My opinion is that they did not necessarily intend for the 20 projects to be rubber stamped 100% funding by the council, but they wanted the council to deliberate on these, consider things like maybe partial funding, maybe some would receive full funding, maybe there would be a discussion with some of the applicants to better understand, but to start deliberating on these 20, and then would, that would allow more consideration for the other projects that go deeper in the listing.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, all right, so it's an initial recommendation to get the process started, and it's going to morph and change and go where it goes from this point on, so, okay, all right, thank you.
If the council is interested, I've pulled up the evaluation categories if you want me to go over the 6. Okay. First one is community investment, which is the potential for an allocation to unlock additional investment or community benefits. So could it lead to other things in the community? These can be found in opportunities to leverage funds to receive additional resources and addressing deep-rooted issues for economic and community vitality. The second category is project risks, the presence of significant obstacles that can disrupt the rollout of the proposal. Can they really do it? These can include the need for additional approvals, funding sources, or formal agreements to implement the project or stated objectives. The third is organizational capacity, the capacity of the recipient to manage the awarded funds and to execute the initiative in an efficient and prudent manner. Great concepts and project proposals can be mismanaged by inexperienced leaders with detailed plans or results is unexpected. So, fourth one, community goals. Successful projects will complement Groton's established plans and community goals. Stimulus funds should address the unique recovery and service needs of Groton residents and augment ongoing initiatives for an enhanced impact or service improvement. Fifth one is project sustainability. ARPA funds are non-recurring, so their use should be applied primarily to non-recurring expenditures. Care should be taken to avoid creating new programs, jobs, or add-ons to existing programs that will require ongoing financial commitments. And the final one is funding need. ARPA funds should prioritize initiatives that are contingent on ARPA to fund it in order to avoid unnecessarily wasting resources on projects with an obvious non-ARPA alternative. So,
Can you send that out?
yeah, I'll send it out tomorrow.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I just want to thank Kevin Fitzgerald for all his work. I know we emailed back and forth a couple times. And, it was quite a bit of a lengthy process, and thanking, the other counselors, Baumgartner and Melendez, who came on, to take the former Mayor Patrice Gronatowski's spot. We basically the scoring system was given to us, and we, went through this. I know one of the members, which was Patrice Gronatowski, made a motion to move 20, I didn't know it was coming kind of thing, and people seconded it and it moved forward. But it was discussed that we would look at these and kind of look them over in detail. But it was a starting point, not necessarily. Obviously, Mr. Fitzgerald did not pick these 20. As well as there was discussion there to talk about making sure some of these items that were broad spectrum items that serve multiple communities. There was a lot of language at that meeting, and I encourage any counselors to watch it as we deliberate over these over time. It had a lot of information on there because folks on that committee, I don't remember exactly everyone, but I know I was one of them that was speaking to the fact of making sure that some of these funds stayed within Groton. because it was, okay, well, this is located here, how is this affecting Groton? And I just remember a lot of the dialogue being where we were saying, we support this, but we want to make sure that we write in there that these funds were going to be for Groton. I know some of the ones that were no-brainers that just fell into the top 20 after going through this process. And again, I encourage all counselors to go through it. It is very cumbersome and time-consuming. Certain things like the access for the bikes, the rescue bikes, that was pretty, was a high impact on our community and a pretty low ask. The respirator fitter thing that's on here as well. But it is a lot of detail to go through, and I think, all of the applicants, have some degree of a need in some way. Now it's just figuring out how to break it down. Do I think tonight we're going to be able to get through 52 applications and then disperse the 20 that we push forward and then decide what % they get tonight? I personally don't think we're going to. But I think we do need to allot proper time to go through these and delegate it. But I just wanted to thank Kevin Fitzgerald for his time, and no one knew what they were doing with this. This is a new program, and so I thought you did a really great job trying to piece together what no one really imagined that we could. And so with that, I'm hoping we deliberate at the end of that committee. The 20 would move forward, and we did not really get to deliberate or break the numbers down any further. So I was looking forward to having the council's input and really processing that down. But I do think there needs to be a form of workshop, and maybe we do start with the top 20 and then break them down as to what number we want, and then go into the other ones with the remaining funding. So my question to the town manager, do you think that we should form a workshop to work through these, or how would you recommend? It's going to be hard on the council like this.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever the council wants, we'll be glad to do it. It would be hard to do it in the middle of a regular meeting.
Right.
Unless you're going to break up into mini meetings.
Yeah.
So maybe a special meeting at some point to go through them all. And I do think it's a good idea to start with the 20, go through and ask all your questions on the 20, and then move down from there.
Thank you.
And I definitely think there should be a public hearing once you guys have some tentative decisions. So.
Councilor Franco?
So I've looked through this, and there's some things that I have questions about, like if you're talking about fiber connection and digital optimization and broadband infrastructures, I thought the state of Connecticut was giving out that kind of funding for that. They have grants and things, so I thought that was could get covered under different grants the state's handing out. There was 1% for arts and culture, and when I looked in there, it was the Cultural Coalition, and they were given ARPA funds from the state of Connecticut directly, and they have been distributing that to communities. And it was an article in the day paper. And so there are issues, like when I saw that there's funding that's going to go to another community, and I wasn't in favor of that. There's also some items in here, and from what I'm understanding, there would be other programs that would cover some of these things, so I'm not sure why they were chosen so high on the list. And then you have things on the list and how they ranked so low, and I don't understand how the ranking, because if you look at, let's just say Groton Ambulance, and they need stabilization funds from paying so much overtime and all the expenses that when you're paying an enormous amount for N95s at the time, and that they were ranked so low on this list. They were almost basically second to last. But then there's other things on here that were ranked so high, and I just can't wrap my head around why, because it's sort of supposed to be a recovery from COVID. It's like to make people whole, maybe basically from some of the things that they've gone through during COVID. So I thought they would have ranked the highest, but it seems like they weren't, and I'm not quite getting this. Can you maybe explain that?
I can try. Just start off. There is not one goal from the federal government with the program. They basically cast a wide net in trying to help a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations and communities. So they attempted to do a lot with the money. They did want to help those who were working some premium pay. They wanted to help housing. They wanted to help communities do more outdoor activities because there's a direct linkage to public health. They wanted to do much of that. But in terms of how people actually score, I think that was one of the benefits of the committee process. I can't necessarily answer why people would evaluate a project a certain way, but that's the way that they perceive it. So the consensus of the group is what's being brought forward. For whatever reason, the committee believed that, but possibly the council has a different perspective. Case in point, if the business community was supposed to be addressed, if you actually look at the allocation of funding, we are low on a percentage basis in providing direct funding to the business community relative to other categories. So I think that, at the end of the day, we have humans that are doing scoring, and there is some level of subjectivity, and the council is the ultimate entity that will make this award and use the recommendations from the committee as it sees fit.
Right, because I know at the beginning when we had our buckets, and the buckets were sort of predetermined, like in our first meeting, the buckets were sort of there, and I think they were chosen and they were put on the board and they were like, well, what do you want to fill your buckets with? But the thing is, there are things that are on here that don't have like an actual bucket, like they don't fall under Parks and Rec, or they didn't fall under a new business, or, I think the ambulance, like stabilizing the ambulance is pretty important, and I just keep going back to that one, but it didn't really fit into one of those buckets very well, so that's what I'm like, or I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how they were chosen and what the reasoning behind that, and if you can't tell me what the reason behind that is, I sort of have a problem, like, I don't get, there's some explanation here, but in the write-ups, but they don't make that much sense to me. It's very, very generalized. And I think they're rescue funds to rescue people that are really hurt, and some of these are like just nice wants. So I have issues.
Council Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So some of these projects are school-based projects, so I just wanted to disclose that I am a Groton Public School employee, so I just want to disclose that. So I guess I'm going to comment on some subjectivity here. I see a huge issue with our police, fire, EMS, and telecommunicators who were on the front lines of COVID when we didn't know anything except that there were people dying from it. When there was no vaccine available, that didn't have the option to Zoom or work from home, that went into work every day and were exposed. And I hate to always go back to personal allegories here, but I have a spouse that is in law enforcement who came home every day and the clothes were put directly into the washing machine. The boots were left outside to be Cloroxed, showered before he had contact with my children because my child has an underlying lung condition. I think we've forgotten the very beginning when things were scary and our police and fire and EMS were issued one N95 mask and told to make it work for a month. And I had a former coworker die from COVID. So the municipality that my spouse works for was given a stipend and thanked for his time working through COVID. So my question is, where is our compensation for Groton public safety? So I take huge issue with the fact that this is not addressed in this top 20. Some of these top 20 seem very vague. So my question is, are we missing some information? And I'm specifically looking at like the small business development services for women and minority-owned ventures. It's $150,000, but the description is very vague. Is there more specific details for this particular item?
The submitted application discusses the services they would provide in business counseling.
Trainings, assistance for an e-learning library. $150,000 is kind of a big chunk of money. I mean, we're seeing others that are 20,000, there's some as little as 4,500. but $150,000 for trainings and e-learning library, like, it seems just a lot. So I was just questioning whether or not there was more detail on that.
I agree. I mean, it is, we marked it as a significant allocation for projects of that size.
Okay.
Just on the one-sheeters to indicate that trade-off of funding something at that scale comes at the loss of a collection of smaller projects.
Right.
Or looks like a significant allocation when we're looking at $8.6 billion total. But their purpose with that is to assist entrepreneurs that are looking to scale their business with those trainings, as well as providing business support with financial awards to businesses as they scale.
Okay. And also the number 19, the 1% of funds for arts and culture, it's also $86,000. It seems like a very vague description on the project. Coming down to 30 seconds here. So I'm just curious if there's a better description for some of these projects, or if this is really just coming from their applications.
They provide a range of options within the application, given if the council were to go with allocating more or less. Their minimum for the smallest amount includes a management fee as well, which is graduated as that award gets larger. And they also provide, just from their experience with Stonington, Norwich, and New London, examples of how they've implemented the project so far, and as well as their framework that they use to ensure that it aligns with the community's history and objectives.
Got it. Thank you. And there's a project ranking number 8 in here for violence prevention education programming for the schools. Wasn't the Board of Ed given their own ARPA funding?
Yes, they were. I was going to comment. Our role, at least the staff's role, is to be a facilitator, a coordinator, to set a framework, issuing basically the RFP, soliciting that information. Our role is not necessarily to accept an application and say, well, we don't like this, or you received money from somewhere else. We took in the 52 applications, and our role is to package them, make sure that they're complete, and provide them to the LRTC and then ultimately to the council. These are valid questions, and we've heard many of these, hey, this entity receives its own money. What about this group? How come we're not representing that group? Those may be valid points. It's not our role necessarily as staff to be critical and to remove a project or to modify it in any way. However, I think that some of the projects could be modified. The LRTC, I think when they were reviewing the projects, they didn't necessarily say, we want to allocate X amount of dollars to this entity. They were evaluating more the general project and ask. They weren't necessarily drilling down and saying what specific dollar amount should be funded, if anything at all. I believe the committee envisioned that that was the role of the council.
Thank you.
Councilor McBride?
Thank you. I'll save my comments for when we do the workshops, but just maybe a point that maybe one way we could look at it is specific payments to Groton Town situations. We could do the approval process through council, but when we talk about outside agencies, like Councilor Kasari talked about WBDC, maybe we would have them come before us and actually get approval where we can ask questions, because it is a little bit different than items that we know about inside, like Mystic Cheese Company, that's a for-profit entity. Maybe they should be in front of us asking for those amounts as well. So I think for internally, specific to Groton that we're aware of, I think the council can move on it, but anything outside, I think it would be wise to have additional parties here to answer questions. Thank you.
Just quick, Manager Burke, can we do meetings similar to the way we do the budget meetings, where it's like a special budget meeting? Could there be like a series of special ARPA meetings
Yeah.
Okay. Second. Do I have any first-time hands? Counselor Baumgartner?
I do. First and foremost, Kevin, it's been a pleasure working with you. You are very much ahead of the curve as far as just doing your due diligence, getting the information out in a very timely fashion, and certainly, it's very difficult to amass all the different opinions and perspectives of not just this body, but certainly the community at large as well, as the ARPA committee. So thank you for your work, and kudos to the town for bringing you in as well. So, just a few comments and questions regarding this process. We settled on a list of 20 recommendations. Not all of the 20 would have been my 20. Likely not the case for Mayor Melendez or Councilor Bordelon, but we did come to a consensus on that because of the way they were scored, using quite frankly a statistically valid consensus. So with that said, just going through a few of these projects, it was mentioned, for example, Paige, that perhaps we didn't go all in, or should have maybe even gone more in as far as economic development goes. And so I would certainly caution this council from paring down, or at least reducing the amount allocated for some of these programs that would support small business growth, particularly to boost entrepreneurial activities for within our community, especially amongst women and minorities. That is something that the WBDC throughout Connecticut has done a really amazing job at. They last couple of years set up an office in London, has done great work in the city there, but certainly they do punch above their weight, and I think we need to have a very targeted effort here in our community to support or very organic bottom-up growth as far as our small business community. We have no shortage of people living here who may not have the business acumen, but need to get connected to people who know how to run a business. And so I think that is a part of a recovery, boosting the economic trajectory for people who maybe not have a fair shot. So I would hope we would continue supporting projects like that. Certainly would also support the pollution mitigation project that was outlined. I read a little bit about the impacts of whey on our wastewater, and it has to be addressed, and it would certainly, I think, pay off. But I'll use my second round after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. Yes, I too agree that, the way these were scored, the question did not address the numeric portion of what was provided. We were just scoring the name and this little snap sheet of what we got, all 52. And so my understanding, again, a motion was made, 20 were moved forward. They just said, take the top 20, someone said aye, and then just, move forward. Not for the numeric or the, I think it was just kind of to push something to get it to the council to get moving. But I do agree that I think these need to be vetted, and it was also discussed there, again, like the one that Councilor Baumgartner spoke of as New London, we were talking about, okay, if we did allocate that, and the council chose to allocate it, that they would consider making sure that whatever that number was, let it say that we allocate 50,000 or 75,000, that money would be kind of earmarked for Groton. And that was the hope of these ones that were outside, that they would earmark it and be supporting the Groton residents and the entities here. And it also was stated that we should bring forward the folks that are wanting to speak to their, the numeric portion or their need for funding. So again, in those meetings, I encourage, you guys to set up the meeting for people to be able to come and speak like we do during budget to the allocation of what they think they can do. For example, it was stated maybe, okay, if one person's asking for 50,000, they may come speak and we can say, here's where we're at. How could 25 help you? you know, it'd be good to be able to have that dialogue, and you can't do that with the paper we have here. So when we do have these breakout sessions, it'd be nice to be able to speak to them directly, and hopefully folks will come. But again, you know, it was a process to get to where we are, and you don't know where the number was going to go. I personally didn't really want to, per se, pick 20. I said move them all, because we're going to pick them apart anyway in the end. And I thought the number ranking was going to be just kind of there, and you had all 52, and you could see where they fell. But I do encourage that, yeah, there's some on here. Again, we didn't get to pick the number, but I think some of these could be moved, where 25 could move here and maybe move to like number, you know, whatever on the list down, and moved around a little bit. So there could be some movement. So I look forward to that. I guess how and when would we set that up? Because I do want to move in a way that we're not dragging our feet necessarily, because we want to get the funding out to the hardest hit areas and make sure, you know, the folks that this money is supposed to go to does get to those agencies. So John, timeline, how would this work? That's my question.
Well, that's really up for the council. We'll schedule it for whenever you want. Keep in mind, it is the holidays, so it might be hard to get too many in before the end of the year.
That's basically all I have, so I look forward to getting this done, the sooner the better, so we can start moving these numbers around. And even if it was more effective to even meet by Zoom, John, is that allowed, that we could get a couple meetings in and do them by Zoom?
Sure.
And we can just have it up on a slideshow? It might be more convenient, takes the stress off of, you
And
know.
if we're going to invite people, especially with holidays, we're going to want a few weeks lead time to give them word. So I would recommend not starting the actual meetings till January.
Okay, and then they will have the option to join via Zoom as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Counselor Franco?
So my concern is, we received the ARPA funding back in October, actually, it was October 5th, 2021, and we're well over a year later. And if there are people struggling, we obviously didn't work very quickly to help them. And I think that's a big issue. That's huge. That's horrible. I mean, just that it's taking this long. And we still, when we get this list, I'm in a place like, I don't even know how to describe how I'm going to tackle this and prioritize it and figure it out, because I realize it's a large list to go through. But I feel like almost like we're going to have to start back at step one again now in deciding this. And I'm like, I honestly, I don't know. I just honestly thought the list was going to come, and when it did come, it was going to really take care of people that were hurt by, and I'm not blaming you. Don't take, just because I'm talking towards your direction, I'm not talking specifically to you. I just thought it was going to really help people that were injured by COVID, and that was going to be the top priority. And when I look at some of how the things that are chosen on here, it looks more or less like some of these are wants. Like, yeah, I want some arts and culture in our community, which I do too. But I think what should have been higher was people that struggled during COVID should get their money first. And people that's how I'm seeing it. And that's not how I see this list in the top 20. Or there are people that went out and walked trails. Yeah, maybe our trails need fixing because so many people walked on them and they really enjoyed it, and now it's become a hobby of theirs because of COVID. So now maybe, those are things that people can get out of the house. And there are still people wearing masks and trying to social distance. There are still people doing this. So that's a good thing, but I just don't see it on the top 20 list, and now I'm afraid that we're basically going to be starting almost back at step one, and I'm sort of discouraged right now, and I'm just telling you honestly how I feel. And I'm sort of, when I saw the list initially, I was just sort of surprised by it. Very, very surprised.
Can I say something?
Sure.
One thing to keep in mind is, remember we did like human services for the 150,000, those near-term needs. When we brought in the businesses, well, the overriding, I think the probably number one thing was daycare. That was probably the biggest thing, but a lot of it was about preparing for the next time something happens. There wasn't a lot of immediate needs given to us. Unless you go through this process with us, you really can't say what all went into this, unless you watch all the meetings. So there's a lot, we did a lot of work on this, but.
No, I'm not saying you didn't.
But anything we saw as an immediate need, we brought. So there was nothing else listed other than daycare. We're limited on what we could do on that.
So a lot of
some of the
stabilization
things-
funds? People don't need stabilization funds that because they were injured during COVID and maybe didn't get the revenue they had prior to COVID?
Well, if you remember, there was a lot of funds out there during COVID. But yeah, we brought people in, and that wasn't something they were bringing up much, so.
Could I add to that as well? It is true, I mean, the town has had the money, and I believe everyone has wanted to get the funding out earlier. When the money first arrived to Groton, there was an immediate push, let's get it out. And then the questions were asked, to whom, for what project, what's the timeline, who's going to manage these? And we can't just start giving money out. We have to know who is going to respond to this. And I think that was the purpose of having the committee. That was the purpose of doing the RFP. And as Town Manager Burt mentioned, we have included every single idea and concept that we have collected over time. Months ago, people were emailing, they were calling, they were talking to us. And that's how we built the initial preliminary needs assessment, from listening to people. I'm not advocating this project per se, but Noank Mystic Library that basically said, you know, we have this project, we want to do outdoor curriculum because that's the safest place to be when that's how we reacted to the pandemic. Well, lo and behold, they have put together a project. And a lot of entities have done that as they've learned and going along. The last thing I wanted to say on possibly a path forward, I think some of the projects have attempted to be as fiscally prudent as possible. And when Kevin put the packet together, he did it at multiple levels. There wasn't just the one-pager. At the same time, we put the full proposals on Greater Groton, so people can read those. Plus, you have a summary listing. So if you want to know the Cliff Note version, it's this big. The one-pager, it's this big. The full proposal, it's this big. And in reviewing them all, you do get a sense for the struggling organizations that need a relatively smaller amount of money to do great things, versus maybe the entity that has a desire and they would like this big award, and it makes you start to ask more questions. Maybe we want to have a conversation with them. But many of these entities that have smaller relative asks, those, you can almost cull those out and see how they really can make an immediate impact on the community and align with the goals locally and also the Treasury's objective with ARPA. So that's kind of more of a philosophical strategy, but I'm basically saying some of the smaller asks are worth really looking at. The larger asks, maybe you ask some more questions and find out, what's that really about? Do you really need that large ask, or can we possibly shrink it and get the money to the people who could use it for other purposes?
And just to point out too, on the timeline, if you remember back in September of '21, that process takes a long time, and the council signed off on that process. There was no way to do it quicker. There really wasn't.
Yeah, the buckets, I recall. It just seems like, I don't know, like the Housing Rehabilitation Fund. And what we get here says they requested $270,000 to establish a dual-purpose housing fund that will assist first-time homebuyers in securing housing to establish their lives in Groton and help homeowners in Groton up to 100% AMI with preventative maintenance. So, and then it gives you project strength and its drawbacks, but it's so general. It's general there. That's not explaining anything to me, and that's like some of my problems. And you're giving $270,000, and then I wonder myself, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Sallie Mae, all these other banking things that could help people that have helped me in the past. So those are the kind of questions that I'm not sure. that there's other things out there that, so I'm not sure.
I think the full proposal does provide more details. I don't know if you're reading from the summary or the ultra summary, I'm not sure what you're reading, but
Like these.
that's the short version.
That's what we have, yeah.
That's actually a project that we had submitted, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. So I think I'll hold my comment at that point, but we are prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you. Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not picking on Groton Housing Authority in here with $795,000, but I just wonder, Mr. Byrd, is that a capital improvement project as opposed to an ARPA project?
Well, they don't go through us for their capital improvement projects, though, so that's why they
They're a
asked
separate
us.
entity.
Yeah, for this, yeah.
The only reason I just mentioned that is just going along with the page of what you just said, or what Councilor Franco was just saying, is if you took that money, you could almost pay for all the smaller projects that are left. I mean, with that one hit, you could pretty much go through here and cover the smaller people and have covered all of those people. Kevin, do you think, from my earlier question that I asked about do you think you have enough information from these projects and the big applications on, full funding, partial funding? I mean, if I look at, Groton Housing Authority, I bet they can't take 500,000, doesn't fit their project. They have to have 800,000. But do you have enough information in your applications where you can give us some more information about that ability to cut some of these things? Is that something that you think you can do?
Oh, certainly.
When we get to the workshop stage, to say, here's an applicant, but we can adjust it. Is that?
And we received that information in the applications as well, just asking them on their feasibility with partial funding. So we could have that clarity on the flexibility, given a set pool of money.
So to cover the things that Paige is talking about, where we could cover a lot more projects, the smaller projects that might be a lot of money for them, but it's not a big amount of money in the overall. Do you have any sense, I know we're sort of moving away towards a workshop thing, I think this probably is a good idea. Do you have a sense of how to run a workshop like this?
Yeah, I think we should gather input from the council on your perception of the impact of COVID as representatives of the community, and to distill that down into what investments you really think will be most impactful to bring back Groton, and also to prepare it looking forward. And that can be investments in government capabilities, that could be specific community investments to people who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. But just as giving your perception of how you think Groton has really struggled in the pandemic, and then also using the insights from the needs assessment to have that conversation.
I mean, I'm a little leery of, I don't want to start the whole project all over again, and if there's a way to sort of short circuit and bring us up to speed. And maybe there's a series of exercises or workshops or ranking systems where we're moving pieces around, everybody gets a chance to do something, but just some way of organizing this so that it's an efficient 1 or 2 days of trying to dissect all this information. Is there a methodology for handling a project like this to do that, or you think you can handle that?
I have thoughts on the top end, but I also think it'd be proper to gather input from other communities as well. I recognize there's an important pre-work to do as well, just gathering feedback from reading this roster of top 20 projects, gathering that as a blind review or scoring and saying, here's where the disagreements were, or here's where you think other projects that weren't included in, it's important you to incorporate those into that budget.
And I think for that workshop, having an understanding of how these scores were sort of derived might be helpful. Let's kind of understand the thinking that went into it. Because it's just a number here, but if we had a little better sense of, just sort of how some of that stuff was done, might be helpful when we get to the workshop stage. Or before, just to
I think my first thought, and I'm not sure if I'm following the question right, but it's difficult for us to give an explanation for every committee member, because they're going to have their own perception and the way they look at things. That's why the aggregate data speaks for kind of the mean, the middle. So we couldn't answer why respondent number 3 chose that number. It's difficult to do that. I was going to suggest, if there is going to be some sort of meeting with certain applicants, or maybe all of them, that there be certain time limits. Possibly there be some questions that are posed to them ahead of time. You know, I've heard from many of you, one of the questions is, can you do what you're seeking with partial funding, and why? Explain why you can't get this funded through an alternate means. How impactful is this to the community? If there are questions that the council thinks need to be asked, we could put something together, provide it to those who have applied, and tell them you have, this is a hypothetical, but you've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it's going to be, to address this. That way you can run through however many you want and get a better sense for whether you support that, and possibly how much you'd be considered, you would be accepting to allocate.
Yeah, I don't want to reinvent the whole thing. I just trying to figure a way for us to get our heads around it. You know, we're basically having to come up to speed with what the council took months to come up, what the group took months to come up with. We're trying to come up with it very quickly and make some good decisions.
Sorry.
Zach?
I was going to say, if we could take a little bit of time with our internal group, and maybe we could take this input and try to make, a couple suggestions for how to move forward with that.
I think that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. And then the last thing I want to say is, and it may be in here somewhere, or maybe we had it and it isn't here now. Was there an overriding philosophy that you used, to sort of approach this whole thing? I mean, we probably had it somewhere in documentation, but was there a sort of a philosophy of way how you sort of said, this is the kind of people that apply, and this is the needs that we have? Was there, or did it come from the U.S. government with the ARPA? This is how we want this stuff to be done.
And I would say, of course, they had their initial buckets in the act, but as we went through the needs assessment, to really, that's what guided us, and I think it ended up that the categories you got through needs assessment fairly matched what was in the ARPA. So that's why they look very similar, because I think the ARPA had it fairly accurate on where the buckets would be.
Okay.
We aligned or looked for recommendations from the Treasury, but also from the Government Finance Officers Association and the International County and City Managers Association produced a lot of the recommendations that led to that framework on how to assess a projects as community investments that just didn't go straight to a longstanding community partner or went beyond that top line, pushing money into a addressed need, to really entrenching it into the community's needs that they could have a long-term impact. So even going beyond that immediately clarified need to say this can trickle down to additional community partners. For example, funding one organization that has experienced difficulties during the pandemic, but they're also providing services to community partners, and using that to sustain or to rejuvenate multiple partners beyond that immediate recipient.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McBride?
Thank you. I understand and can agree with the frustration on, not getting the money on the street, sort of say. But I also think we need to remember that the guidance was what you had to have it incurred by 24 and you could spend through 26. So we have time, so I think it's good that we're making wise decisions. And I really think this is a terrific document that you've come up with, so I want to appreciate and say thank you for that, because as I'm just spending some time on it more tonight as we're talking, I really think you provided the details. And from a high level, it looks like, the 5 or 6 buckets, you have it laid out. And we as a council, I think, as an option, maybe we need to look at the $3 million that's left, how much we desire to put into each bucket and go backwards. So take the 3 million, do you want to put 1 million in human services? Do you want to put so much in economic development, so much in premium pay, so in those buckets? And then once we know what that number is, then maybe we can look at each of the submittals and see how much each submittal should get, just as a suggestion. Or another thought is, if you look at this top 20, looks like there's 6 human services and 3 parks and recs. So maybe we could tackle, I mean, those are your immediate needs usually, right, your human services. So if this council wants to move forward quickly, maybe at the next meeting, we just bring up those 6 human services submittals to come before us and review to see if we should be granting them money. So I just thought those would be some things we could consider trying to get money in the streets and another approach to try to get to the end game. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll take my turn now. I was thinking exactly the same thing as you, Councilor McBride. I went through all the categories, and I sort of crunched the numbers. So I'm looking at these needs assessment recommendations. So just as an example, economic development and resiliency had a 15% needs assessment recommendation. So as a total allocation of the $8.5 million, that's like $1.3 million. During the budget process, we allocated $85,000, so basically none of it. So in order to hit that 15%, we'd have to still allocate the $1.2 million for that bucket. So if you're talking about how much we should put in each bucket, I've sort of crunched these numbers here, like human services, in order to meet the 12%, we need another $880,000. And I can share these numbers with everyone after. The only issue is, during the budget season, we overfunded Parks and Recreation by about $980,000. So all the other buckets will have to come down proportionally because we'd be over $980,000. So we can't actually like meet the 15% or the 36%. I'm looking on page 70, by the way, on the bottom half. Because the needs assessment for Parks and Rec was 12%, and we've already allocated 23% to Parks and Rec. So that is, that's already above the recommendation. So this is where I'm going to be taking, this is how I'm going to sort of be making my decisions on how I think where we should go. These needs assessments went out to the community. They said, this is the percentage of the money and which bucket we want to go into. And I think that's where I'm going to be in deciding on how much money from each of these categories is going to go into the remaining. So just, and I'll share these with the town manager. We can disperse them to everybody. But that's all I have. Any other discussion?
Point of information.
Mhm.
Do we have more money left over? Have we allocated all of it, or is there more money?
No, so there's.
Seawall money? Seawall money?
Seawall money.
Right, so, yeah, so on, that information is right on page 60. So we have $3,445,654. They're recommending an $850,000 worth of contingency. So the spring funding round is like around 2.5. Now, it's my understanding that there's an additional $1.4 million that we've earmarked for the seawall, but we may not necessarily have to use that money for that. So the total funds unallocated should be $4.8 million,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay, great. Okay. Essentially,
Yeah.
if things worked out in our favor,
Yeah.
if we got the grants for the seawall, then
Right.
we did 4.8.
3.4,
2.4.
3.4 guaranteed,
Okay.
4.8 if we don't have to pay for the seawall.
Okay.
Including the contingency.
Including the contingency, right.
Right. Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
10 o'clock.
Yep, 10 o'clock, so consensus for the council to continue. All right, not seeing the consensus. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Moved by Parker, seconded by Jones. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned unanimously at 10:06.